Hello, everybody.
Just a little.
I can
practice
hum
here.
if it'll help.
I don't think. I don't think that.
seven
I
seven
don't think
weeks
that's.
off.
I don't think that's the answer.
We'll get it started here. I wasn't ready to do this. Playback.
My kingdom for a Jared Morris.
No kidding. Let me see here. Pretty impressive.
We'll cut this all out of the podcast.
Oh yeah, well, probably not actually. But.
Hi, you too.
Yeah. I don't know, fellas.
All right, that's all right. We can just start.
Let's just add the music later. Did we send the tweet? That's the only important thing.
I don't know. Hold on just a second.
all
I
right.
should be able to figure it out somehow.
You're good. Last minute change of plans.
Coach, I got nowhere
good.
to be, buddy. And
I know. Brian's Beach Assembly Call podcast. Any music now? Nope.
No.
You guys aren't hearing it, are you?
Nope.
Well, ain't that just a kick in the old pants? Let me try.
it's already my favorite episode.
You get a little bit of the pre. Everyone's getting a little bit of the pre stuff. Let me try this. Any luck?
Nope.
Nothing.
All right. Well, we could just keep talking
Let's
off
just-
the cuff until Jared shows up.
Yeah, why not?
We're good. We can just start.
Why don't you just
We'll
start
be
the
fine.
show? And yeah, why don't we just start talking and Jared can divvy it up however he wants, and we can explain that it's the first one in a while. We're all kind of getting back to this.
All right, we'll just start.
Let's go.
I wouldn't
Just
worry about
start, Andy. Don't worry about the sound.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I'm hearing it, but it's obviously not going through
Yeah.
whatever. So
You're
All good.
right, and honestly, I'm sure it sounds great, Coach.
it's fantastic. It's our regular music. It's actually whatever.
all right.
Absolutely.
Let's just dive
All
in.
right.
Let's talk
All
basketball.
right. And after a few minutes, welcome Hoosier fans to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where some weeks we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 336th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 1038th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of July 18th, 2024. I'm your host for the moment, Andy Bottoms. And we'll begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And this week's banner moment will hopefully occur tomorrow night when the Indiana alumni team Assembly Ball opens up its quest for glory and $1 million in the basketball tournament. The IU team is a number 1 seed in the Butler Regional and will play its first game on Friday night at 8 Eastern on Big Ten Network against the Valpo alumni team. And if seeding holds, the IU team will face the number 4 seed Men of Mackey in the second round on Sunday, and then we'll see where things go from there. The basketball tournament has become a really fun summer event for hoops junkies like us, and there's some luster without an IU flavor in the last few years, but this team, it's exciting to have an IU team in it, and so you've got IU legends like Yogi Ferrell and Jordan Holes headlining the group in the backcourt, along with Devontae Green, Juwan Morgan, Miller Kopp, Brace Thompson, and Troy Williams. And Noah Vonleh was also recently named as an addition to the team, at least for this season, with no credible reports yet of him being on a 2-year plan. And the team will be coached by Adam Ross, who previously coached at the Sagemont School in Florida, where he coached Will Sheehy, previously coached the Armored Athlete TBT team that featured former IU players like Sheehy and Holes. Christian Watford is serving as the team's GM, and Isaac Green is one of the assistants. Final Four for the basketball tournament is going to be held in Philly on August 2nd with the championship game on August 4th. So we are excited for the Assembly Ball team to be in it. And we wish those guys and all the former Hoosiers the best of luck as they begin tomorrow night, and look forward to giving us some basketball to watch, although I'm sure some of us have been watching some Summer League games, which we'll talk about one of the key participants here in a couple minutes, but exciting to see the team in it, and looking forward to the basketball tournament just a little bit more than usual this year with an IU team in it. So with that, let me introduce my co-host this week with one quick note to kick us off here. Obviously, we've not done a show in 7 weeks. Didn't announce anything ahead of time because realistically, I don't think we didn't realize the hiatus would be that long or even really that we were taking a hiatus. Just kind of happened for a number of reasons, but we're excited to be back with you tonight, despite the technical difficulties at the top. And we'll get into more details about why we took the time off, what to expect moving forward as we get to segment 3. So stick around with that until the end if you're interested. But there's basketball stuff to talk about first, and that's the main reason we're here. So we're going to focus on those topics here at the beginning. So with that said, I better skip the intro that was meant for myself to show that I'm not totally Ron Burgundying it and just reading directly off the run sheet. We've got a longtime high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana, the founder of Delphi Bracketology, a man who knows how to celebrate a thrilling victory in your rival's home gym, and maybe one of the first times in a summer show that anyone has actually worn a collared shirt. He is the coach, Brian Tonsoni. An IU college
Hey, everyone.
at that, so...
it's a Father's Day gift from my son. A little Indiana shirt, state of Indiana shirt for the podcast tonight. Glad to be here. Good to see everyone in the chat. Good to talk basketball. But summer was nice. It was a nice little break for me, and I would believe for us. Played a lot of golf. Had dinner with my son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter this evening. That's why the collared shirt. And it's getting closer to school starting back up for me, which means college football, and then obviously what we're all interested in, college basketball. We have a lot to talk about. Looking forward to watching the game tomorrow, the TBT tournament and the Elam endings that are going to be happening, which always brings some good conversation on whether people like that style of basketball or not. And then we'll talk later about the schedule. And Andy, I'm sure that you have some thoughts on the schedule from a bracketology point of view. And we'll discuss what that means for Indiana basketball going forward. And we're just a couple months away from practice starting. And yes, practice is important. So looking forward to getting back into a good discussion with all of you and for all of you in the chat mob.
All right. Also with us, we have a senior writer at Sports Illustrated, who I learned before the show does not make hats, apparently. He's a self-renowned shot doctor still looking for patients. Man who's getting a little tired of telling everyone, I told you so, now that Caleb Williams has signed his Chicago Bears contract without incident or controversy. He is Ryan Phillips. And Ryan, anything to rant about this week?
David in the chat just said, these guys are still alive. And my answer is, apparently. I mean, it's...
Barely.
It's been a while. We're still hanging on. No, honestly, not a whole lot to go off of. The off-season shows are always a little dicey because there's just so little information coming out, especially with rosters basically getting finalized right after the tournament. But it's just good to be back here. I missed these guys. They have families and things going on. And so, the feelings may not be mutual, but I also miss the audience. I miss you guys. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening. If you're on the podcast, thanks for listening too. I miss doing this, and I'm glad we're back. We took a very much needed break, I think, for everyone. I was here ready every Thursday, but these guys had other things going on. So it's but it's great to be back. And we're really excited to dive back in and get back to doing what we love.
All right. Well, let's talk about our presenting sponsor. I don't know if anybody wants to, try to sing the beginning of that. I'm sure that would be great. I think everybody probably will abstain for fear of that being used against them repeatedly in the future. But this edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, is presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you'll find just about anywhere. And it's not just IU. Home Field has unique, interesting designs printed on the softest, most comfortable fabrics for over 150 colleges and universities, plus plenty of other brands like Little 5, IndyCar, and on and on. Always expanding and trying something new. Their Summer 7 series is concluding this week, I believe, with UT San Antonio. They had hat mystery boxes come up this week. And so you need to make sure you're following them on social media, subscribing to their texts and emails to make sure you're staying up to date and that you don't miss anything. And also be sure to check out the article friend of the show, Zion Brown, wrote about Homefield at IndyStar.com. It's a terrific retrospective on how Homefield started and became such a beloved and respected behemoth in the college in the collegiate apparel space. And it'll always be one of our biggest points of personal pride that they were our first advertiser back when they were Hoosier Proud. And it's been quite an honor for us to be along for the ride as they've grown over the years. Couldn't happen to nicer or more genuine people. So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your entire first order. Again, that's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. As an aside, my older daughter is looking at colleges. We've been doing some of that.
How is she old enough to be
one of the
looking at
qualifications
colleges?
for me is making sure that they're a home field school so that I make sure I can get some good stuff if we go there. So far, so good.
Bearing the lead, how is she old enough to be looking at colleges?
That's
by the way?
unclear to me. That's I don't know. I do not know. All right. Well, Hoosier headlines tonight. We're going to look at those. We're also going to talk the non-conference schedule, and then we'll answer questions if you're looking for what's ahead on the show. But Hoosier headlines, really the place to start. Khalil Ware's play in the summer league, at least as of when Jared captured these stats. 5 games, 18 points a game, 8.4 rebounds per game. That includes 3 double-doubles, 2.5 blocks, 57.6 from the field. Just 20% from 3, 57% from the free throw line, but really has strung together a series of impressive performances. I think went to a great organization, as as a lot of people have mentioned, a great place for any player. But I think a guy who really, made such huge strides in terms of work ethic and how. Oh, I heard that. I mean,
I heard that.
For one, I've got plenty of hair. That seems unnecessary and rude. I know Amy would never talk that way to me, so I'm not going to take it personally. But but I think looking at where a guy going to a perfect place to really build off the progress he made during his year at IU. They've been utilizing him in a lot of pick and roll scenarios. He posterized somebody yesterday on one of those where he jumped substantially higher than the defender and put one in over top of him on a lob coming off of a pick and roll, and really has shown some back to the basket moves in the pieces that I've watched, and really off to a good start for him. So super excited for him to be able to build on that. And Ryan, one of the questions that we got came from Stephanie, and it was essentially, were you surprised at how high he went in the draft, and what does that say about his abilities and also what Coach Woodson and the staff were able to do with him?
Yeah, I think I'm not surprised how high he went in the draft, just because we know his potential. I mean, being that big, being able to move the way he does, and being able to play on the perimeter, that's what NBA teams are looking for. He's more, Kevin Durant than Shaq. He's a face-up guy. That's where he's most comfortable. He didn't play like that at Indiana because that's not what Indiana was utilizing him as. And he did some a little bit later in the season, did some more work out there. But I think he's a guy, if he can command the ball and he can handle it better, I think he becomes a really valuable weapon as a guy who can shoot over anybody, just given his length, and then can also go inside and mix it up and go over people in the lane and go, he's quick. I think they can get enough quickness out of him where he'll be quick in the lane as well. So he can work the post a little bit. His length defensively, if he can get his side to side mobility going, I think that's great. And I think the biggest thing that he got at Indiana was confidence. And I think that Mike Woodson has been really good at instilling confidence in individual players. And that's what happened with Khalil Ware. I don't think he got tremendously better skill-wise. And that's not against – he was only here for 1 year, so that's not against the staff. It's not knocking against the staff. It's that he was already really good. He just didn't get to show that at Oregon because he was so down on himself, and the coaching staff didn't seem to support him very well. Came to Indiana and was the guy that he was projected to be at Oregon. And so I think that sometimes the biggest thing you get from a coach is not a skill development, not any of that. It's just the mental game of being confident and having a belief in yourself. And that's what Khalil Ware got at Indiana, if you want to say the biggest thing. There may have been a little wrinkle added to his game here or there, but compared to what he got mentally, nowhere near as important. And so now he's a guy who was drafted in the first round, going to the Heat. He's going to be along with Jaime Jaquez as another really great pick by Miami last year. You've got a nice young core being built there with a couple other guys. And it's an organization that develops and hangs on to its players. I think it's a perfect fit for him where he doesn't have to come in and start right away, can get his feet wet, continue to develop. People forget just how young he is. And yeah, I think it's a perfect fit. And I think Indiana should be celebrating, what they were able to give him, what they were able to do.
Certainly a great story. You can sell the guys you're trying to get out of the portal, if nothing else. But Coach, early impressions of what you've seen from Ware so far in the summer league?
Well, I think he also benefited from TJD's play this year, being drafted in the second round, and TJD being able to play at a high level in that rim runner, block shots, and what we've seen so far in summer league is a lot of that pick and roll stuff from Ware. So I think he benefited from that, and that's a credit to what Coach Woodson does with his big guys. It'll be very interested to see if does Ballo continue that, and Ballo has a different skill set from what I remember seeing Ballo than Ware or TJD as far as the incredible above the rim play. But Woodson has developed pros 2 years in a row at the 5 spot with what he does. And I agree with Ryan on the confidence thing. Ware had competition at Oregon. He had a situation where his trusted assistant coach left, and it wasn't working out, and he didn't get a lot of run. And then he comes to Indiana, and they put him in a position to be successful. And that is, a credit to Coach Woodson. And then, again, he's going to continue to get post players who are interested. I think that's why Ballo was interested, because he's placed 2 post players, and so you get Ballo real quick because of that reputation. And obviously, we all want that to be to the guards as well. Have we seen another Hood Schifino? Have we seen that come in? And that's when Indiana's going to take off, when you have multiple positions going to the NBA, because multiple positions are developing that confidence or that skill level that's necessary at the next level. But right now, Woodson's knocking it out of the park with his bigs. And the other thing you got to be, summer league is summer league too. It's a bunch of rookies and free agents and a couple second-year players trying to play too. And he's going to have to really step it up when the games are for real. And Miami has a great history of putting people in good positions and running good stuff and maximizing
great
talent.
Coach, too.
They're just well coached. So what an excellent program for him to go to.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add on this sort of development, piece of what Indiana does, Mackenzie Mbako really started slow last year, and they kept saying they just needed to get him to be confident. I don't think he showed anything different than the skill set that was advertised, but you saw him get more and more and more confident as the season went on. And late in the year, he was one of your better offensive players and maybe your most skilled offensive player. And that just comes with the development of confidence. Now, this offseason, he's got to add wrinkles to his game. It's hard in the summer to fully transform your game. It's very rare that happens. You just try and firm up what you do well. Now he's had the whole offseason to add to it as well. So we'll see what they can do from a development standpoint with him. But just getting him to a point where he was confident in himself enough to attack in the Big Ten is a huge, huge leap. And it's hard for a freshman to do that. And Ware was essentially refreshmaning as when he was at IU too, because he didn't get that much at Oregon in the way of consistent playing time. And so I do think that is something that this coaching staff has proven they can do really well, is get guys to believe that they're as good as they are. And to me, that's as important as the development piece. You ideally have both, but they're both as important. It doesn't matter how good a guy is. If he doesn't believe in himself and he doesn't actually deploy those skills, doesn't really matter. So you want to do both. And they've shown one side to be really, really solid in Indiana.
Yeah, only 2 quick things to add for me. You mentioned the block shots from a statistical perspective. Thought in the portions that I've watched, he's really done a nice job of being able to block shots, provide some rim protection as you get into playing against more seasoned guys. As you said, Coach, when you get into the regular season, how much that translates remains to be seen. But I think it's a good sign he's able to do that and really has made some impressive defensive plays in summer league. And the other thing, I think he's really benefited from the spacing that you see in the NBA. His ability to cover a lot of ground with his long strides on pick and rolls and different things like that. I think he's definitely benefited from that and some of the option or the highlights that I've seen of him and would continue to do so there. So really great start for him. Excited to see that and a great feather in the cap for the program for sure. Jalen Hood-Schifino has been sidelined had a lumbar micro discectomy survey or surgery. I botched the easiest word of the three there. That
I was going to say you were doing so well.
Darn it. Surgery in March. His timetable to come back is unknown. Miller Kopp has been playing in summer league for Oklahoma City. Played in 5 games and shooting 29.4% from 3. He'll be on that TBT team, as we mentioned. And TJD, after a stint with USA Basketball for a little bit, he's been playing at about 12.7 points per game, 8.5 rebounds per game, and 2.5 assists on 63% shooting. So kind of picking up a bit where he left off in the in the summer league.
Can I make a prediction?
Sure.
He'll be on the next Olympic team. I think his game fits the international game really well. He'll be one of the last bench guys on the next Olympic team.
Wow.
There we go.
He fits the international game well. I think he'll do like the World Cup thing in between. They'll like him enough and they'll stick him on the back end of that team. That's
that's what we've waited 7 weeks for, that kind of,
that kind of bold prediction.
That's bold.
Now look, don't record this and bookmark it and bring it up in 4 years.
Well,
I'll totally deny saying it. But no, I do think that he fits really well. If Kerr stays the coach, which I don't think he will, but I think he's a guy that could wind up on the back end of the bench.
Yeah, last piece of NBA news. I saw this come across tonight. Perhaps it happened earlier, but saw some news that Victor Oladipo was going to retire from the NBA. Injuries certainly have been a staple of his last few years in the league. Had some really high moments, though, both at IU and also in the NBA. So it seems like the injuries have finally kind of taken their toll on him. And at least I think I heard that he was announcing his retirement from the league. So disappointing to see that, but a super talented guy and a hard worker. So be interested to see what he gets into from here, if that is in fact the case. But figured we'd add that to the more NBA related section. I don't know, Ryan, if you know any more about that than I do, because you're probably following some of that a little bit closer. But I feel like I saw that pass my timeline tonight.
It's been rumored. Yeah, I didn't know if it was official or not, but that's been rumored. He tweeted something out the other day that was pretty opaque and sort of ambiguous, but it sounded like something was going on in that way. Look, Vic was riding very high. He was injured, and then I think he was upset with the way that injury was handled, and that created a rift with the Pacers, and then he moved on, got injured again, and I think that the people in his camp, I'm not close with them, but I've talked to some people, and they think that the way that first injury was mishandled led to a lot of the other injuries. And so they were pretty bitter about it. And that's why there was that acrimonious split from the Pacers. It wasn't as people thought it might have been a contract thing or whatever. It was just about how he felt misused. And he really wanted to stay in Indiana, and he really, loved playing in Indiana. He was basically the mayor of Indianapolis at the time. And so I think that all kind of rained on that parade, and then he's had a string of injuries since. That has to be really hard, especially for a guy who a lot of his game was based around how athletic he was. When you lose that, it's very difficult. And so I feel for Vic, if he does step down, he'll always still be just an absolutely beloved member of the IU family. One of my favorite players I've ever watched at Indiana.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, coming up on Assembly Call Radio, we're going to discuss the hottest non-recruiting topic in the IU basketball world this offseason, and that is the non-conference schedule. A lot of different opinions out there on that, and we are going to give ours. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right.
Cue the music. Oh.
Welcome, everyone. We're just motoring on through.
The 7 weeks, my soundboard took a shit, I think. And I didn't know I was going
explicit.
Well, I didn't know I was going to run it until about 2 minutes before we went live, and so I'm rushing around getting my screen and didn't even check. I was driving back from Noblesville, but sorry.
No worries.
Coach,
it's fine.
No worries.
It's fine. We'll just play like a ton of sounds at the end, and then people can just kind of listen to what they would have. Would have gone with. So all right, cool. Well, let's
go right into it.
Talk some schedule.
We promised Jared will show up at some point, by the way.
Yeah, he's got a chatty.
Teddy's talking a lot.
Chatty toddler tonight. He said so. We'll work on that. All right. Well, we can, just pretend that the music was there. And welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips. And it's time to discuss the non-conference schedule, which came out, I think, last week, maybe the week before. Yeah, well, we'll see. So just to make sure we're on the same page with the listeners, we're going to run it down here with the current Bart Torvik preseason projections for each team. So on November 6th, you got SIU Edwardsville, who is ranked 316th. On November 10th, Eastern Illinois, who's 314th. A couple OVC teams there to get started. Then on the 16th is really the first test of the non-conference when they host South Carolina. That was a game that had gotten announced in the offseason, not as part of any kind of home-and-home situation, just kind of a one-off game there. South Carolina really surprised people last year. They're ranked 54th right now coming into this season. Then on the 21st, they'll take on UNC Greensboro, who is ranked 183rd. And then you hit the battle for Atlantis, which is over Thanksgiving, the 27th through the 29th. The marquee teams there are Gonzaga and Davidson, who are ranked 9th and 10th, respectively. As you look at that, then you've got a cluster of teams ranked between 58th and 61st in Providence, Oklahoma, and Louisville. So all bunched pretty tightly together. In that area, then a little bit of a drop off. You get to West Virginia at 83rd, also new coach there, lots of turnover from a year ago. And then Davidson at 165. Creighton was supposed to be in this, and I think that Providence is the team that took their place.
Yeah, that's right.
Which would make sense.
Davidson went to that tournament in Vegas, right? The NIL.
Creighton, did you mean? Yeah.
Creighton, I'm sorry.
Creighton. Yeah, Creighton. So Providence stepped in for them. So kind of a mix there. I think won't be too hard to see Gonzaga, Arizona placed on different sides of that bracket. It's really just which one that IU gets potentially matched up with in the second round. Then you go into December on the 3rd, Sam Houston State at 114th. On the 6th, Miami of Ohio at 240th. Then you've got a gap where you'll have some of those Big Ten games, finals, all of that stuff. And then they finish on the 21st of December against Chattanooga, who's 154th. And a week later, they face Winthrop on the 28th, who is 174th. Torvik did do some updates in his modeling, which dropped IU to 31st. So as you look at that schedule, I think the things that stand out to people, no true road games is one of them, and no marquee home game. I think South Carolina, you're playing a major conference team at home, not marquee in the sense of a Kansas like what you saw a year ago, not some of the matchups that you get coming out of the Big Ten ACC Challenge and things like that. So I would agree with the sentiment. There's not a marquee game, but I do think South Carolina's solid. We'll see what they're like this year. They had some transfers like everybody else. So whether they can replicate the way that they won't sneak up on people this year the way that they did a year ago. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I think at least a reasonable early test here. So before we get into a couple of these questions, Coach, I'll go to you first. Initial impressions that you had when the schedule came out, and maybe how, if at all, that has changed since then as you've taken a second look at it.
Yeah, when it initially comes out, it's like, oh my gosh, there's not that marquee game, and when you dive into it a little bit deeper, I think it's not too different than what Coach Woodson has done in years past. It's about 7 games that are bye games and 4 games against Power Conference. I think when you look at when you break it down that way, I think it's an okay schedule if things go the way it needs to go in Atlantis. And that is at least win your first game and get into a situation where you're playing Arizona or Gonzaga in the semifinals. And if you win or lose, you still are playing teams that have already won in that competition. You lose that first game, and then you're not going to get the quality of opponents that you were hoping for. And so the first game at Atlantis becomes vital. But last year, 4 marquee games, they were just real. UConn, we ended up playing Louisville, but we had a chance to play Texas, Kansas. Those games really draw the attention of everyone. And they're not there on the schedule. That's just reality. But the 7 are pretty good. When you have Sam Houston State, who's won recently, Chattanooga, Winthrop, programs that have been to the tournament, UNC Greensboro in the 100 mark, and bringing a South Carolina in is better than playing Louisville last year. So you have the 7 kind of bye games, I think, are okay to build your resume if you take care of business. We saw last year that Indiana did not in those games, and that hurt their overall net ranking. And you got to have some games like SIU, Edwardsville, and Eastern Illinois to get on film and get players going. You can't, overschedule as well. I'm a big proponent, guys, of the 6-5. You got to play 6 bye games and have a variety of easy and difficult bye games, and then play 5 Power 5 conference games. I think that really sets a team up for tough conference play. That's my ideal, but I have no problem with the 7-4 model. It's just you got to win in Atlantis game 1 and beat a, if it's Oklahoma, they have a chance to be a top 50 net win. That's a quad 1, an outside chance. They're moving to the SEC. And then you got Arizona, and if you win a couple there, you're sitting really, really good because, in what the year we were a 4 seed, we didn't win any of those marquee games. We beat Xavier on the road. But you got to get those 2. So I don't think it's as bad as everyone thought initially. My concerns that it's not really a good home schedule for season ticket holders, and I do think that needs to be considered. And the fact is, everyone was really excited when Woodson got us out of the Crossroad Classic because we wanted to play better competition than Butler and Notre Dame, and we're not playing it this year. South Carolina is the same as Butler and those things. We're not playing on that weekend. Yes, we got into the battle for Atlantis, but you can still play in an MTE and play in things like the Crossroad Classics. And I'm not clamoring to go back to that. It's just we all wanted out of that to free up schedules to go play bigger and better games. And now we've kind of gone back. So I'm okay with it. I would like to see a little tougher schedule, but I'm okay with it, is in my general thoughts.
Ultimately, Coach just wanted IU to get a chance to play Notre Dame in the Crossroads so he could see Micah Shrewsbury.
Exactly.
There's no reason to beat around the bush. Absolutely.
Yeah. To be any excuse to be within 20 feet of Mike.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Ryan, first impressions of the schedule for you before we get into a couple of questions.
Look, I think it's a soft schedule, but at the same time, I didn't really expect them to go super hard, and maybe that was part of the mistake last year with so many new guys, and maybe they need to start off slow to try and give these guys some time to develop chemistry and all of that. It's funny, I tweeted out that it was a soft schedule and people jumped on me. I'm like, I'm not saying I have a problem with it. I'm just stating a fact. It's a softer schedule than they've had. You got a couple. I guess the thing is, and people have said, well, they're trying to game the net by just winning these easy games. And it's like, you got to blow those teams out. And IU has not done that under Mike Woodson. Now, maybe they will this year, and I certainly hope they will. But if you're trying to game the net, those bad games, you got to win by 20, 30, 40 points. You got to exceed what you were supposed to beat them by to get real credit for them. Atlantis could be good for them, could be really good for them, but it depends how the bracket lines up. Depends if they win early to advance and get to play those tougher teams later. I don't know when that bracket will be released, but it's but Arizona and Gonzaga are both there. If you get a chance to play like Coach said, Providence or Oklahoma in the first round, win that. That's really good for you. But then you got to go win one of the other ones and take down one of the other ones, or else you're relying solely on Big Ten season to get in. And that's what they were doing last year, essentially. And it was tough. They went 500 and didn't make it. And so I do think either way, if you overschedule, you're setting yourself up for a problem. And if you underschedule, you're setting yourself up for a problem as well. So this is kind of a little bit better than a trash schedule, but there are a lot of you start to have problems if you don't take care of business in these games. So they have to take care of business. It's on them now, and there's nobody else to blame it on if they don't succeed. They've got the opportunity.
Yeah, I think you touched on one of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about. I think there's a lot of misconception about how to game the net. Can you game the net? All those things. Poster child for this last year, Iowa State. Iowa State won games in the non-conference by, this is going to be fun because I'm going to try to do math on the fly, 41, 55, 31, 55 again, 4 against VCU, 19, 25, 51, 38, 32, 15. Like, those are their non-conference games. It is not just a This is a great schedule because you can stack wins, because that doesn't matter in the net. It matters how you perform against the expectations that the analytics have. And Galen did a really good job of giving a breakdown of this and kind of talking about, how that works and what that means. And ultimately, we saw this play out for IU last year. They were projected to beat a number of the teams they played by bigger margins, and they ended up beating them. It drove their net down and ultimately hurt them in the long run. And you can disagree with that being the way that it works, or not like the net, or any of those things. Like, those are all valid arguments. Coach and I have talked about that. There's probably things about it that are good, better than the old system. Still things about it that aren't great. Is it great that you're rewarding teams for just running low-ranked teams off the court? Probably not. I don't know that that's great for the sport, but that's the reality of the situation right now. And so that's what IU puts itself in a position to do. It's not just winning those games. It's not saying we have 7 games that we can win and then figure out how to win a couple more. It's you got to beat the expectations consistently in those 7 games. And IU struggled to do that last year. That means nothing with a roster that has a whole bunch of new players. That means nothing about what they'll be able to do this year. But that's the important part. It isn't just about winning, unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it. It's not just about that. And so that really puts pressure, one, on the performance of every game from the beginning. You're going to be huge favorite against SIU Edwardsville, huge favorite against Eastern Illinois. Those are the 2 worst teams you play right out of the gate. How are you able to do that? It's a time when teams are still coming together. IU is going to be no different than tons of the teams in Atlantis. Louisville's there. I think they're going to be, they almost can't be worse than they were a year ago, but they got a ton of new pieces. Everybody's in that situation where they're trying to do that. So I think that's what is most important about that. Like I said, Iowa State is and Jared had put in the run sheet, like, there's lots of sub 250 and lots of sub 300 teams on that list of wins that I had a year ago. And ultimately they got into the Big 12. There was lots of other good teams in the Big 12. People could say that was because the whole league had gamed the system, whatever. And you got to a point where you really couldn't take a bad loss and you got lots of chances at good wins. I don't know that I would put the Big 10 in that category quite as much this year, which is the other thing. You put your eggs in the Big 10 basket. Again, this is Torvik, it's preseason stuff. Nobody ranked higher than 16th, which is Purdue. Now you've got a bunch of teams between, you've got 5 teams between 16 and 24. You've got then another cluster of teams in the low 30s. You've got another cluster of teams in the 40s. So maybe those turn out not to be true, but there are unlikely to be marquee game after marquee game in the Big 10, especially with the schedule being where you're only playing so many teams once. You really can't put yourself in the position where you got to do all your work in the conference. So that puts a ton of pressure on that South Carolina game, puts a lot of pressure on Atlantis. I think Coach said it well. You win that first game, really, no matter who it's against. You almost don't want to play Davidson in the first game, beat one of the other at least mid-tier teams in the first round, get a shot at either Gonzaga or Arizona in the second round, and then just kind of see what happens from there. So that's really going to be important. As Coach said, I think the net result of all of that is you're kind of looking at a similar, the teams are different, the locations are different, but you basically got 4 games that really mean a lot, and then you need to really perform well analytically in the other 7, which is an area that IU struggled in last year. But I think when you step back and look, I don't know that the schedule is wildly different than a year ago. Coach, I know at one point it looked like you were ready to jump in there, and
I want to point out
about the net.
a couple things. The net is offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. And so you've got to score at an appropriate amount against the opponents that you play, and you got to hold them down. Against Army and those teams, the amount of 3-pointers that were scored, and ultimately that leads to a margin that was too short. That's the explanation. That is true. But we also saw the committee do some interesting things last year with San Diego State moving down, that whole conference. All they did was get quad 1 wins against themselves, and they were all 2 or 3 seed lines down because they didn't play good non-conference, and they didn't get marquee wins out of conference. All of their good wins came in conference. So there is a history of at least last year's committee saying you can't just play conference games. You got to show us that you can beat non-conference. Every one of us complained about the Mountain West being, mistreated. but their reasoning came out and at least explained what they did. You also look at Iowa State. Some people were saying they were a 1 seed. They were the last 2 seed, and they played 9 quad 4 games. So they weren't even in consideration by the committee for a 1 seed when their record should have been, because their non-conference schedule was 324. So that stuff still matters. You can't just rack up wins. You can't even just rack up 50-point wins. Because Iowa State probably was a 4th or 5th best team, maybe bracketing wise, and they weren't even considered. Auburn was 5 in the net, Alabama was 9 in the net, and they were both 4 seeds. Why? If the net was so high, why weren't they ranked higher? They were 3-7. One team was 3-7 in quad 1, and the other team was 4-10 in quad 1 against the top opponents in their conference. They didn't win enough games. Now they got a 4 seed. But one of the things that this schedule does is Indiana's looking at a 4, 5, or 6, just like they did 2 years ago, as opposed to maybe if you can beat a Kansas or you can beat a UConn and add that Xavier win was good with a road game. So some of the things that make the schedule light still will come to fruition in seeding, where Indiana could rack up wins. And then everyone's going to yell at the committee that, what was the year, 2016, Indiana wins the Big Ten? 15-3 and gets a 5 seed. Big Ten champions got a 5 seed. Why? They didn't do anything in a non-conference. So the committee is not just the net and not just beating the opponents and automatic Indiana's going to be a 2 seed. They got to get good wins. They got to get good road wins as well. So there's so much more that goes into that. And that's where you got to play Gonzaga and beat Gonzaga, or play Arizona and beat Arizona, because you only have so many opportunities to get good wins. And non-conference wins mattered last year. We'll see if they matter this year. You got to get some. And the schedule can be troublesome in that area.
Yeah, so a couple questions that we got about this. Ryan, I'll throw this one to you first. It's just labeled as Substack user, so unfortunately I cannot give credit to whoever this is. But on the non-conference front, how do you guys feel about the lack of a true road game for the 2nd year in a row? Also, lack of a high-level home game for season ticket holders. This person said, I'm not, by the way. Used to feel like IU always had a stronger non-conference schedule than Purdue year in and year out. Definitely not the case this year. What are your thoughts on that aspect of the schedule?
I think a lot of the upper tier teams are moving away from true road games and doing those dome games and tournaments and all of that stuff. And so I think that's kind of going by the wayside. And I love that they have a home and home with Kentucky coming up. That's great. And if you're going to do a game like that where it's special, then you can have a true road game. But I think that a lot of teams that consider themselves a top program, and I know Mike Woodson and the athletic department wants to project as if they are a top program. And so they're going to start operating like Kentucky, like Kansas, like Gonzaga, like these other places that do that. Hey, we're going to go do a premier event, tournament event. And we're also going to do a bunch of home games to get the payouts essentially of the home ticket prices and all of that. And, go and do, maybe a big neutral site game in Vegas against Arizona, or as they've done in the past, and those things. So I'm not sure that's that big a deal anymore. You get your true road games in conference. So I just think that's just the way college basketball is going now. It's about having those home dates for revenue, and the rest is you're trying to do marquee events and put yourself in a position to play really good teams at neutral sites to prepare for a tournament setting. And just seems to be the way that everything's going these days.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think there was something came out today about Gonzaga and UCLA doing this, quote unquote home and home, but not a home and home, like at neutral courts, closer to each school as you do
Kentucky and Indiana are kind of doing that, too, for part of that series.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where you got to separate a little bit of the part of you that loves college basketball from it's cool seeing Kansas at IU. It's cool seeing some of these other games, but the reality is a lot of the schools don't want to do that for whatever reason, whether that's a chance to play in a bigger venue and make more money, whether that's a chance to get a neutral court game, whatever it may be. I think that's things have changed a ton. I think back to some of these, and Galen's talked about this as well. Some of these old IU schedules where it's like you're playing Kansas and Kentucky, and it's like the opposite.
North Carolina,
you have like 3 quote unquote bye games, and the other 8 are all like Power 5 teams. Things have definitely changed from there, and you also have to be able to. I think there's I think it was Galen that said this too, giving him a lot of credit tonight. I mean, like, the people who are organizing these events want teams who have had a lot of recent success in them. And like it or not, that's not who IU has been recently. And they aren't as attractive a target for some of those things as we might like to believe that they are. And so you've got to work your way back to that. And I think they certainly can eventually get into more of those things and be in a position to challenge themselves a bit more. But I think the reality of the situation now is that this is probably a reasonable schedule. They just have to perform well against it at this point. And that would be true of any schedule. But so anyway.
Well, one last part of that real quick is that the other problem with trying to find a home and home with the true road game, and then maybe the next year a home game against a big opponent, you have to find a willing dance partner, and teams aren't willing to go to Assembly Hall a lot. They'd rather play it at a neutral site and do it twice or whatever, instead of doing that trade-off, because then they have to come, do the true road game and fit with you. So I think that's part of it too, is you have to find another program that doesn't have one of those already, 1, and 2 is willing to come to your home arena. And it's just not as easy to find anymore.
Well, I think the other thing is, the Big Ten has had those early season games in early December. And sorry, Jerry, we're not like freezing you out since you came, but I'm trying to at least get to.
We're just pretending you're not here.
guys, we all agreed once he got on, we would just pretend that nothing happened, right?
No, this is great. Keep going.
But I think you also see some of those weekends that there are some of the bigger games before teams get into like finals and things like that in early December is typically when the Big Ten's playing these games. And I don't know that they're going to change that at any point soon, because it's good for them to be able to get good inventory of league games on and things like that. So I do think, in addition to some of those other things, the league is not purposely painting them into a corner, but it is, another week or so that you have to leave open in order to be able to schedule some of those games when you may see other marquee games taking place at those times. So with that, we'll welcome in Jared. Jared, the next piece of music that is played on the show will be the first. So, we said at the end, after we all sign off, we'll just play a bunch of them right in a row. Everybody can still get the full experience, and we move on from there. But welcome to, as we near the end of our scheduled discussion.
Are you saying our production is a little rusty after a few weeks
sucks.
off?
Well, to be fair, I do not think Coach or I will not throw this completely on him, was prepared in any way to step into such duties. And the efforts to do so with limited preparation. What about how you think that would go for people who haven't been on in a while?
It seems in 7 weeks the software has updated and changed, and I didn't check it.
Look, we had to knock some cobwebs off. It's been 7 weeks.
Yeah. I know.
I was full. Jared, don't give excuses. Don't give excuses.
Jared,
it sucked.
You're gonna
poor
love
performance.
You're gonna love listening.
It's really bad.
You're gonna love listening to the first 3.5-5 minutes of this audio file. It's fantastic.
No, I'm very excited. No, I was fully planning on hosting. It took my son forever to get to sleep. As I texted you guys, he decided tonight he would be as chatty as Tom Crean at a player development seminar. So he just did not want to stop. Coach, I'm not even sure your microphone's on. I think it may be the computer picking up your microphone, by the way. But that's okay. Maybe not. My ears may be rusty, but I am very impressed with the collared shirt. I appreciate that you dressed up for our return.
We've mentioned that a few times. Yeah, Andy and I are in our summer attire, our summer show attire, and he's trying to show us up.
As Joel says, reminds me of the old days. Ryan just needs some cereal. So
after the show,
pretty much. All right. So did we get all our hot takes about the schedule out? Are we good?
Yeah. Only thing we did not hit was Jared's, not your question in terms of an early look at whether 9-2 is good enough or needs to be 10-1. Coach, I'll throw that to you first. Not sure if you have thoughts, and I probably, as the bracketologist of the group, will probably say, well, it probably matters who the 2 are or who the 1 is, depending upon how the schedule shakes out in Atlantis. But What are your thoughts on? Is there a big difference, really? I guess it's probably ultimately the question between 9-2, 10-1 in that scenario.
Yeah, I do. I think Indiana needs to go to at least 10-1, depending on who you play. It's Mr. Obvious there, but if you lose to South Carolina and you lose your first game, I mean, and then win two more, yes, you have a nice record of 9-2 in a non-conference, but you don't have that big non-conference win. And yes, you can pick up some wins in the Big Ten, but we don't know is there a team like Purdue when Indiana beat Purdue 2 years ago that those two wins plus the Xavier road win, there were some really nice wins that got there's some sound that got us into a 4 seed and in a good position to get to the Sweet 16. So it is a schedule that I don't think you can afford to lose. If your two are in the winners bracket, you lose two in the winners bracket 3 games in a row. I don't think that's as bad. So 9-2 with 2 losses at the back end of Atlantis, no problem. But anything less than that, and I think Indiana's got a lot of work to do in the conference.
Yeah, Jared, what are your? Feel free to give any overall impressions of the schedule that you had, but kind of thoughts on obviously 10-1 is better than 9-2. I think we all know that, but is 9-2? Would you walk away from that feeling okay?
Yeah, I mean, like always, it kind of depends on who you're playing, who you beat, so who those wins are. I don't know. I think the schedule's fine. Like, I've had a hard time getting worked up on it either way. I can see the arguments for why it's a little bit disappointing not to have the marquee home game, and there's a whole lot of triple digit projected teams on there, and yet then you look at, and you guys probably already talked about this, you look at what teams like Iowa State did last year, and they got a 2 seed playing an atrocious schedule, that non-conference schedule that was far worse than this one, just by running the score up on those teams. And so the big thing for me, and I guess one of the questions that we've kind of had as you go through the Mike Woodson era, is you just want to see some I guess strategic consistency with what's going on. So if you're going to play a schedule like this, then you've got to be ready to do what college basketball asks you to do in the present day, which is beat bad teams by a lot of points. And so that may mean that you can't do your platoon subs and do some of those things. You got to play those games to win by 25, 30 points to get the maximum value out of them. So if we're going to schedule like this and then plan our in-game strategy to take advantage of it, then I'm on board with it. But if we're going to do that and then, we're happy just winning by 6 to 10 points, now that's not very smart. So whatever we choose, I just want to see the strategy be consistent, and go along with kind of the quote unquote best practices that we've kind of seen other teams do. So I feel like it's going to be hard to judge it until we see how they approach it in game. And so I guess that's why, to me, like, it's here. I can see the arguments on both sides, but until we actually see how they're approaching it in the games, I have a hard time assessing it at any real level.
Jared, I think that's a huge point. I think Indiana under Mike Woodson has gotten off to relatively slow starts, and then all of a sudden made a big push at some point in the season. Obviously, last year with the 5-game winning streak late. Even in the year that Indiana got to a 4 seed, they, I think, were at one point 10-6 and come off 3 really tough losses early in January, and then kicked it in with a 5-game winning streak. Indiana cannot afford to wait till late December or January to play their best basketball. They're going to have to play their best basketball. And this is for anyone in NCAA. I don't think you can, try lineups and different things out. Like, you have to figure that stuff out in the summer. And that's one of the issues with rosters now, with teams, sometimes 10 new players. Indiana at least has a base of returning players. Are you gelling and picking up that offense and defensive system that the team wants you to run? And can you play that at a high level early on in the season? And I get that. Everyone says, well, the schedule's here because you need time to gel. No, Indiana doesn't have time to gel. No NCAA team really has time to gel. You only have 31 games. So I understand that. And in theory, that is a really good thing. But in practice, you can't be 9-7, 10-6, and then expect a winning streak to carry you in today's college basketball.
Yep. Ryan, final thoughts on schedule, kind of record expectations or needs from your perspective to answer this last question?
I leave that to you guys because you're the bracketologists who understand, how this all stacks up with computers and things. All I'll say is just go win the games. I mean, talk is cheap. You put this schedule together. This was a plan. Now go win the games. If you go win the games, all is forgiven, and you win them, by the requisite amount of points and whatever. Just go win the games, and no, we'll sit here and talk about it. But it doesn't matter if you go take care of business. And this program hasn't taken care of business enough in the way it needs to over the last few years. And that's not just Mike Woodson. It goes back long before that. Turn the page and take care of business, and it won't be a problem. So that's just all I have to say about it. There's all this, discussion about schedule and all of that, and it's very important. But if the team plays the way it's capable of playing, and you look at the talent on that roster, doesn't matter. It won't matter. Just play the way you're capable of playing.
Yeah, I think there's probably a much larger topic to be discussed than what kind of Jared and Coach alluded to, because ultimately what traditionally you would have looked at these games at was the opportunity to get guys playing time, try out different combinations, do whatever. The current reality is that's a luxury that you can't necessarily have. And I don't know that that's great for the long run from player development, from all those things. But you also have to operate within the reality that you're living in right now. And for IU, that means they have to perform well against those games, and every opportunity to be able to beat teams and beat them handily is something they really have to take. And so we'll see. First couple games will be telling. Play the two worst teams right out of the chute. That could be helpful, could not be. And some of these teams may change. That's the hard part. You're trying to use the early Torvik rankings for give me a ballpark of where these teams are going to be. So you look at those first two from the Ohio Valley, typically not a highly rated conference, probably not going to have a bunch of teams that are ranked too high. Give or take, they're going to be different than those, but they're going to be some of the worst teams on your schedule no matter what. Some of these others could get a little bit better, could get a little worse. It's really the only things we have to go off of directionally right now, and it'll. I don't think we're going to look at the games dramatically. I think it'll be a talking point, but I think with so many new faces, there's a lot of other things that we'll probably be looking at least for a couple games, maybe more so than than how how much they won by, different things like that. But unfortunately, like it or not, it is important. And that's not changing this year, probably not changing next year as you look at what the selection committee is doing. So we all just have to kind of be prepared for that and keep that in the back of our mind as we're watching the games and watching the performances. All right. Well, that being said, we're going to take our last break here. And coming up, we got some mailbag topics. And then we'll also discuss why we took some time off and what's coming next. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call as I give the hosting reins back to Jared.
The other thing I will say, Ryan, just on the point that you're making about taking care of business, I think you're right. In Big Ten play, you just have to win the games. Just win Big Ten games. But in the it's like Army last year. They won, but they didn't take care of business. That's the subtle difference with if you're going to schedule those teams, you got to go beat the pants off of them.
Yeah, and by take care of business, I do mean win like you're supposed to win. But against South Carolina, win that game. You win that game, you're in a good position. You go to Atlantis, win 2 of the 3. You don't have to win the whole tournament, but take care of business in 2 of the 3 games. You feel pretty good about yourself, and that's just, again, Indiana, whether it's been in the Big Ten or preseason or whatever, for the last decade almost, they just haven't taken care of business. And we
gotta do things with urgency.
There you go. Yeah, and that's the other thing is early in the season, they need to not be playing like they're practicing. It's not the NBA preseason. They need to be hitting the ground running when they start, as Andy pointed out really well there at the end.
You also have to lose correctly. How many games has Indiana gotten beat by 20 points? And to not Northwestern, but to Nebraska and Penn State and Auburn last year. You can't afford. So in the Big Ten, you can lose games in the Big Ten and get a good seed. We saw that. Yeah, it's a tough conference, so you're not going to go 20-0. But you also don't want to have your wins be by 2 and your losses be by 16 or 18 or whatever on the road and not be competitive. So that's part of that taking care of business, is playing to your capability and being competitive night in and night out. And then the stats and the net and all that stuff take care of itself. Well, it's been the fluctuations of play that get in the way. And even in the good year in the last 3 years kind of kept us at that 4 seed and, consistent solid play.
It's worth noting. I mean, Coach Woodson comes from the NBA, and when it's a bad night, it's an off night, you yank your starters, you lose by 30. It doesn't matter. It's no different. Losing by 30 is no different than losing by 2. That's not the case in college basketball. You have to play close, especially, when you're losing those games at home or wherever. You have to make a good showing, even if you're going to lose. And that's definitely been a change in the way that the ratings work and all of that stuff. But it is a mass difference between the two. You play 2 games close together. The second one, you might not have the energy and you might get blown out by 30. In the NBA, that again doesn't matter. And in college, it really, really does. And that can be the difference between you not getting into the tournament and between missing it and getting in.
Well said. All right. You ready to jump into segment 3? We can hit a few of these questions right off the top, and then we'll jump in and talk about all the other stuff.
Okay.
Let's do it.
If that works. Okay. Sweet. Here. Is anybody doing a local recording, by the way, on audio?
I am.
Okay. Beautiful.
If it's working.
Thank you.
And really, at this point, who knows? It's
He's definitely recording something.
Some people are here.
It's unclear what, but it's something has been recorded.
Something
going out
is
on
moving.
YouTube, so, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
What's up, y'all? It's Devontae Green giving you the green light to watch Assembly Call after every IU game. Just don't listen to their opinions about shot selection. Remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Devontae. It is going to be so fun to watch Devontae Green playing basketball with an Indiana jersey on again in the basketball tournament. Looking forward to that. I know you guys talked about that early in the show. I'm Jared Morris, by the way, here back on the Assembly Call here with Andy, Ryan, and Coach. And it is segment 3, so it is time now for our mailbag. We answered some of the questions earlier during the course of our discussion in segments 1 and 2, but the rest of these questions all submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community on Substack, and you can learn more about that at our website, assemblycall.com. So we're going to hit a few of these questions, a few of the remaining questions, and then we'll spend some time talking about why we took a hiatus and kind of letting you know what we're planning here moving forward for the future. But let's start with this question from Sam. He says, with the departure of Zach Edey and Caitlin Clark, who is the player Assembly Hall hates the most now, and who are some notably hated opponents from the past? Andy, we'll start with you. I was just trying to kind of think about this in my mind. You think about a lot of the most hated players, guys that come to mind like Paul Mulcahy and Coleman Hawkins, and like a lot of these guys are gone now, and rosters are so much in flux. I don't have anybody off the top of my head. Like, we're going to hate players from Rutgers. We know that. There's going to be some annoying guy on Northwestern that we're going to hate because that always happens.
Somebody from a shooter from Iowa.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes.
And Wisconsin.
That Harding guy from Iowa. We'll probably hate him. So there's some archetypes that we know that we're going to hate. But are there any specific players right now that you can think of that are right in line to take that mantle of most hated in Assembly Hall?
I mean, I feel like Braden Smith and Foster Lawyer are
okay. Fletcher
Lawyer. Sorry, I feel like they're would be right at the top of the list. I would say so.
Lawyer for sure.
Those are the two that initially came to mind. I mean, there is another Harper at Rutgers now, which feels like there's some. I mean, really, we have nothing to hold over them at this point as far as that goes. But I do think there's.
He's awesome, by the way. He's so good.
I don't want to hear that. I'm not interested.
I know, but he is.
Those are the ones that I love. I don't really think anybody I couldn't think of anybody else on the women's side necessarily. I mean, nobody's gonna bring about the same reaction that people at IU had to Caitlin Clark for sure. So that one felt like a tough one, but I thought the Purdue guards were the ones that immediately came to mind for me.
They are the obvious ones. There's no question. Coach, does anybody else who's left at Illinois? don't even know I know they're going to be good, but
mine's still going to be Brad Davidson. Like, I don't know. I don't care if he's not playing.
jeez.
Sorry, Tyra.
Okay, Brad Davison. I still, I think about names from the past. The first name that always comes to mind when people ask this question is Jamie Skelton, which is a name that only the old heads are going to remember from Ohio State, who always seemed to kill Indiana. He was always a hated guy. Ryan, what about you? You've got all these Pac-12 teams, former Pac-12 teams coming in now.
Everybody transferred away.
Who should we hate from those teams?
Everybody transferred
We
away.
don't know any rosters anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
With the
have they
transfer
submitted-
portal.
Do they have players anymore? I don't even know.
Numbers.
No, there's not enough time with guys on the same team to really build up that hate as much before.
That's the thing. It is weird because we were thinking about, I was thinking about this question earlier today, and I was just like, I don't even know who's coming back. I'll know a week before the season when I look through the rosters, but it's not like I'm circling a game like I hate that guy, I can't wait. It's like, I mean, the Purdue guys we know.
Brooks Barnheiser, he's kind of hateable if you're not on his team.
I mean,
I respect the way he plays.
There's always an Ophi Wisconsin big guy and a Wisconsin shooter we hate, and that's mostly
Brad Davidson.
That's mostly not about them. It's mostly the fact that Indiana can't beat Wisconsin. They're probably very nice guys, other than the Brad Davidson. They're probably lovely kids, but we just can't beat them. So we take we want to blame them and not the ineptitude of the program.
The show has devolved into Coach just muttering the names of Wisconsin personnel under his breath.
I guess maybe
coaches. That's right. The hate will get more directed on coaches, like Tom Izzo with his whining post-game comments, and Greg Gard with his great guardness. Yes,
Fran is probably public enemy number one, I think, for the entire Big Ten. It's kind of entertaining when you're not playing him. Not in a go Fran way, but this is kind of funny. But when you're playing him, it's really annoying. I have a question. Okay.
Oh.
Growing up, you guys were around before I was with Indiana. How big was the Brian Cardinal hate?
Big. Huge.
Okay, was it huge?
For sure.
Because I watched national games with him and just instinctively hated him. Had nothing. Maybe it was a pre-IU. I had some premonition I'd end up there, but I didn't like him from the West Coast. I can't imagine what it was like in Indiana.
Oh yeah, of course.
Was he one of the biggest?
Yeah, that would be one of the.
He was definitely. He was definitely one of the biggest. Yeah.
The big goofy center, Scheffler, or whatever his name was.
Yeah. Brad Miller was a little bit that way too. I felt like he was kind of hateable.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's hard to find. I've been trying to look through
near the top of that list.
I've been trying to look through
Kramer.
some of these rosters in the Big Ten. I struggle. Like there's Klesmet from Wisconsin is the Wisconsin guy. I feel like that would be probably the hateable guy this year.
The guy that we just let shoot 3 after 3 after 3.
Put the whole roster on there.
Yeah, but I will say there's a lot of these. I mean, the Illinois roster. There's really no holdovers that had any kind of role last year. Like Ty Rodgers is basically the only guy who put up any numbers for them a year ago who is there. So I find it hard to have a strong reaction. I mean, Ace Baldwin was giving it to the crowd pretty good when we were there, unfortunately. So maybe he's one, but yeah, I don't know. I
can't believe he's back.
The roster turnover is wild to look through some of these and be like, what are you going to do? Like,
even
if
Michigan
AJ Hogard
State
was still at Michigan State, I would have thrown him in the mix, but he's not. So
it's crazy. Yeah. Even Michigan State having turnover, and they're such a stable program, it seems like over the last 20 years, and even they're doing it.
Nah, but you hit it, Andy. I think for most people, number one on the list would be Fletcher Lawyer.
Yes.
I mean, he's an Indiana kid, but just because of the flopping and all that nonsense. So,
and he's the one who's going to hit the dagger 3 on you, which is what,
not anymore. Now he's not going to be open as much anymore.
Well, no, that's fine. But I'm saying in the past, like that, and the guys that you hate the most tend to be the guys who are small, kind of cocky, and can shoot, like the Scott Skiles kind of thing.
Ryan.
Yes. There you go.
Gillis of Purdue, he was kind of one because he would do a lot of fake tough guy stuff at various points, but he's at Duke now, so that'll.
No, he's at Duke.
Yeah, that'll only make him more
fit in great.
But.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us know who you're planning to hate this season. I love
such a
this
positive show on our return.
yeah.
Hey, pick someone to hate. We're
these
already
questions were asked
divisive
of
and
us.
everything. Let's just hate people.
We're responding to the topics people want us to discuss.
I
Here's one
will
from
say,
Brian.
to be fair, Jared, I bring this up only because of an experience I had with you meeting this gentleman. Joel put Jimmy Jackson in the
Yes.
in the chat. So, Jared, we as we were walking into one of the games, Jim Jackson got out of a car to call the game, and Jared nicely and as respectfully as he could told him that he used to really hate him.
That had to be really awkward for him, because I like stumbled when I'm talking and I'm like approaching him right as he's getting out of his car to tell him that I hated him growing up.
Stalker.
Yeah,
No
I appreciate that he did not call the cops on me and was very gracious.
He was nice.
I'm sure he gets that all the time in Indiana, though. Let's be fair, or around the Big
Sure.
Ten, really. Yeah.
Still hate him, and Calvert was better. So that's all we need to say.
There's no question.
By the way, happy belated birthday to Calvert and OG, which has to be the best birthday duo in Indiana history, maybe
Probably.
in Big Ten history for one time or for one team. Calvert and OG together. I mean, that's a pretty incredible birthday duo right there. Okay, from Brian. Now that players can wear jersey numbers that end in 6 through 9, should IU make the number 8 an honor jersey for Bill Garrett, similar to the football team having 44 as an honor jersey for George Taliaferro? Not suggesting Bryson Tucker shouldn't be allowed the number this year, but think that would be great if the number was an honor bestowed on a worthy player going forward. I love this idea. I think that would be incredible if they did that and kind of made the number 8 a special number that you really have to earn. Maybe it's not always worn, but through, good community acts and how you comport yourself on and off the court, all the things that Bill Garrett stood for. I think that would be something really, really cool if Indiana did that. So I would fully support that.
There's only one answer to this question. And it's yes. I mean, it's 100%. They should do something like that. Other schools have this, where they have an honor jersey and things like that. And whether it's, the IU football program, other ones, they become iconic things that kids strive for. Senior leader, something like that, a recruit who exemplifies everything you're looking for, or something. They give them to people for various reasons, and I think that absolutely, it 100% should be a deal.
The most important thing it does is it keeps Bill Garrett's story top of mind.
Exactly.
You've got the statue there, which is great, but if you have some sort of annual ceremony or something that you do for whoever has earned that number, it's another chance to tell that story and keep it top of mind. And I mean, I think that would be just an incredible thing to do, just to honor Bill Garrett. But that's a good story to tell on the recruiting trail to players.
Yes, it is.
So I just think it's a great idea that would really just have a lot of benefits for the program. So 100% love that idea. I don't know. I mean, maybe we should just send that in to the university. I mean, someone's probably thought of it, but I guess we could send that question in and just, get that conversation started, because I think it'd be fantastic.
It would be.
Okay, so John Ringer said it would be nice to get an update on the 2025 and 2026 kids at a glance, since we are going to be losing a lot next year. So I think this question is a good transition into us kind of talking about why we had this hiatus and what we're planning on doing in the future. Because one of the things that I think we all agree on, and I mentioned this in our community, is I think we're going to spend a lot less time talking about recruiting moving forward. And this kind of goes in, what we're about to talk about, kind of with a little bit of a scaled back schedule in the offseason, but even during the season. I think part of the reason why all of us, for different reasons, came out of last season and really the first few weeks of the offseason feeling a little bit burnt out, which is, part of why this kind of unplanned, unannounced hiatus happened, is there's just so much more to cover now. And recruiting, especially, not just high school recruiting, but also portal recruiting. There's so much to cover. It's exhausting. It's hard to do it well. And so, I think we've tried to do that the last couple of years and have tried to do our best with it. But the truth is, there's other sites out there that do a better job. Alex and Inside the Hall, Jeff Rabjohns at Peegs, Mike Schumann at the Daily Hoosier has been doing a better job with this, kind of keeping their finger on the pulse of recruiting. And so I think for us, we'd like to stick with our wheelhouse, which is analyzing the basketball, analyzing events that have happened. So if a guy commits, hop on to a scouting report because he's going to be a future Hoosier. That's great. But in terms of trying to keep tabs on the 2025 and 2026 guys, like I could regurgitate something that I read about Braylon Mullins, but we're not really getting any firsthand knowledge of those guys. And so I just think for a lot of reasons, it makes sense for us to focus on that a little bit less, unless we, happen to get, some kind of great information just falls in our lap or whatever. But I think going forward, we're going to spend less time talking about recruiting until guys actually commit, and then really talk about how they fit and what their game is like, all those different things. And so it's not that the question isn't relevant or good. It's a great question. There's a lot of really important prospects Indiana's in 2025 and 2026, but there's better people to talk about it. And I just think I don't think it's really something any of us are that excited to focus on. And so I'd rather stay fresh and talk about the stuff in our wheelhouse than focus too much on that. Is that an accurate representation of how you guys feel about it as well?
Yeah, I think it's changed. I mean, recruiting has changed to an incredible degree. It's kids will really want to go to one school, get one offer of cash for another one, and change their minds in a minute. And that's the nature of just the world that is now. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. They should go get as much money as possible. But you used to see trends in recruiting. Guys are sort of leaning one way, and now it's largely about money. And so it's hard to track. It's hard to follow. And you're right. You have to be almost not just a basketball recruiting reporter, but also a business reporter as well to follow it and follow where everything's going. So it's nauseating to some degree and really tough to do, as you said. And there are people who do it better. And I think we'll talk about guys when they commit. I think that's fair. But other than that, it's not our wheelhouse. And there are people who cover that better and do a much better job. So it's not really our sweet spot.
Yeah. Coach or Andy, any thoughts to add on that?
I rarely had anything to offer when we would get these kinds of questions in the past, and so that won't change. It's just not something I feel like I have
to go to bed earlier.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, like it's not something that I've spent a bunch of time. You've only got a certain amount of time. It's just not something I've really chosen to spend a lot of time on, even historically. So yeah, I think there's plenty of people who do a great job at doing that, and I know that I'm not one of them, and so that remains unchanged.
Yeah. Coach, do you have a former Wisconsin player that you'd like to disparage in lieu of recruiting?
No,
he's just mumbling coaches and players' names on mute for the last 3 minutes. It's fine. Yeah,
I didn't like him either. But anyway, no, it's just what we get is secondhand. I get some information from coaches about leans and all of this, but really, I've always been on record of saying when they commit, then I'll take a deeper dive into that person. I still look at those other sites to kind of see, but there's a lot going on with Sicily, and there's a lot going on with Mullins and things like that. That those other reporters are more detailed and do that on a day-to-day basis, and so. I've always taken a back seat to the recruiting until we do a podcast for an official recruit anyway. So that's really no different for me. But I think that's a good move for us because our wheelhouse is discussing basketball, discussing schedules, discussing, those things. I think that's our niche, and we need to get back to that and stay away from some of the speculation in some of the areas of recruiting and other things.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads us into talking about, why did we have this hiatus and what's moving forward? And, I think we all kind of came to whatever it was 7 weeks ago when we did our last show. It wasn't planned. We didn't really set out to do this, but I think we all kind of came to a similar mental and emotional space about the same time. And I think there were different reasons for each of us. And so I'll obviously let you guys speak for yourself. But just to kind of open up on it a little bit, I sent you guys an email probably in the middle of February. I don't remember exactly when it was. It was before the senior day stuff and all of that. So it had nothing to do, with any of that stuff. But it was after I went to an IU baseball game that was here in Frisco. And I'm not I'm a big IU baseball fan because it's Indiana, but I don't know everything about the team. And there was something about that experience sitting there in the ballpark with my kids. Indiana was down. They came back. They had this thrilling victory. And it was just a lot of fun to cheer for Indiana and to be an Indiana fan. And without knowing every little bit of context and, everything about the players and all the stuff going into it like we do for a basketball game. And it reminded me of, I guess, how I used to feel when we first started doing the show, just the pure joy of cheering for Indiana with all the other stuff out of there. And I think for a lot of reasons that really got buried under a bunch of stuff last season, for what we do and the way that we cover the team, doing post-game shows and then trying to do the Thursday night show during the season. Bad seasons, especially like last year, can really be a drag, and not fun and all of that stuff. And no one wants to hear podcasters who do this by choice complain. But there's still a feeling that you get to at the end of the season. And I think for me, with the way that last season went, and then, getting all involved in, talking about the coaching stuff and the recruiting stuff, I got to the end of the season and a few weeks into the offseason and really felt disconnected from kind of the joy and love for Indiana that initially got me wanting to do this show in the beginning. And so when you combine that with just the realities of life, having two young kids that are growing up, taking on more responsibilities from a work perspective, there was just a lot less time also. And so those two things kind of coalesced, and we would talk about planning a show. And it's like, well, I'm not available. You guys aren't available. And so it just kind of kept not happening. And it was one of those things that wasn't by choice, but it was probably a little bit by choice. Like, I think in the past we would have moved mountains to keep our schedule, and we didn't move mountains, and so I think there were a lot of factors that went into it. But that led to us having a conversation a few weeks ago to basically reassess how we want to approach this, because I think the community that is built up around this, the folks that are here after 7 weeks off and still hanging out with us at 11 o'clock at night, you all are very special to us. That part of the show is very special to us. And the relationship that the four of us have, getting on here and talking, that's very special to all of us. And so we didn't want to completely lose that, but I think we realized that some things needed to change. And so one of those things is not talking about recruiting as much, because I think when we get on here, if we're going to talk about something, we want to be very educated on it and give you the best information possible. And so if we remove a few of those things, now there's less pressure to try and stay up to date on all of that. And I think also just having a little bit less stringent of a schedule is going to help out with that. So before we get to that, let me stop, because I want to give you guys, again, like I said, we all came at this for different reasons individually. I want to give you guys a chance to talk about that too. But I think ultimately we want to get back to kind of the feeling that we had when we first started, and I think when you do this, there's always a tension of, hey, we're fans, but we want to put good analysis out there. And I know for me, getting more caught up in what's the best way to put it, trying to be respected for the analysis as opposed to just indulging being a fan, I think I got out of whack with that, and that got lost and imbalanced. And I want to get back to being a fan and enjoying this and enjoying the team and taking it seriously, but not too seriously, if that makes sense. And so I think we kind of spent this time thinking through that and trying to make some changes that will get us back to that. It's going to mean fewer shows, as we're going to talk about. We're going to be here a little bit less, but I think in doing so, hopefully we can obviously continue to put out something that's great, but also, feel good about what we're doing at the same time. Anyway, that was kind of rambly. Let me turn it over to you guys, because I know, you each probably have some things that you want to say from a personal perspective as well. So I don't know who wants to go first. Sorry, that was a really bad lead in.
I guess I can go first.
If we let Ryan go first, then he won't interrupt other people.
That's a good point. It's a really good point. I also won't listen to anybody else, and that's probably a good point too, because I won't jump in. I think that all of us felt kind of heavy at the end of last season. That was the first time for me. And Jared has in the past, and this is a while ago, it kind of been like, I've got things going on in my life. Do we want to keep doing it? And this was years and years and years ago. And we'd always be like, no, man, it'll be fun, whatever, brag back. Last year wasn't fun. And I think that my perspective is, if you've listened to Assembly Call for a long time, the best shows are the ones where we just have fun. And I listened back to some shows last year when we were going through all this hiatus stuff. And the one show that I came back to and had me smiling was our 1000th episode, where we just had fun. And, some of the other ones were heavy. The team wasn't playing well. Even some wins felt like losses, and I went back to that and I just thought, let's just have the mentality of, yeah, we take it. You're right. We take it seriously, but this is just basketball. It's not life or death. It's not those things. This is a voluntary activity that we are choosing. We better be enjoying it. And this show would not be the same without Jared. It wouldn't be the same without Andy. It wouldn't be the same without Coach. And doing this show wouldn't be the same without them. So I want to do this show in a way that all of us can be together. Not every night, but in which we're all involved. Because the best part about this show is getting together with these guys. And we love the community we've built. We love the people who listen. We love the chat mob. You guys are amazing. And we even love the people who randomly parachute in after post-game shows and disrupt things. It's like, they kind of stir the drink. All right. But, finding a way to do this so that we can all be here together is what matters the most to me. And so I think that what we've decided works really well. And also we want to make this a lot lighter than it has been. It's been heavy. It's been a rough time to be an Indiana fan. I'm talking to the fans too. Let's try and just have fun with this, because, it's very important to us, but it's also supposed to be fun. Basketball is supposed to be fun. Being a fan is supposed to be fun. Even when in tough times, it's supposed to be fun. So let's all get back to doing that, because when we started this show, it was goofy, it was fun, all of that. We've kind of seen behind the curtain and seen how the sausage is made at times, and I think that's made it much worse to do this show. I would much rather be doing it from an analysis and fan perspective than an expert perspective. So that's how I feel about it. And again, it wouldn't be the same without all three of these guys on the show with me. So I can't imagine doing it otherwise. So working out a way so we can all do this together is the most important thing.
Well said.
I'll go real quick. I love college athletics, and college athletics has changed, and I'm struggling as an old fart. I'm struggling with that. I have no problem with NIL. I have no problem transfer portal. There's good reasons for all that. Galen has explained all of that, and times change. It's just the whole free-for-all that the roster transformation of all of these schools, and from a bracketology aspect, not just an Indiana aspect. And I'll say, too, the losing weighs on you. It really weighed on me. It did with the football program, and I've lost interest in the football program, and Signetti's kind of got me going back. But, man, I had tailgate schedules set up by now and all of those things, and just the continuously losing kind of it just wears on you. And then add to the fact that you got to go talk about it a lot. Last year was tough. And at the end of the year, you're trying to figure out. And what I've really tried to discern this summer is that I love Indiana. I'm going to root for the uniform. I do that with baseball. I know the players once the season starts, and then I get into Nick Marshall, who transferred in from Western Illinois. Now I love Nick Marshall. I didn't know he was coming. I didn't know who he was, but I want Indiana baseball to win, and I get to hang out with Dale in the outfield. And so there's lots of good things that happened, but you root for the uniform instead of getting caught up in all of the details of, what this person says happening and this person and what you hear and people calling you and saying this about, what's happening inside the program and someone else countering that. I'm just an old dumb basketball coach. I want to talk about why the pick and roll worked or it didn't work or the sub strategy, and I'm not going to be nice. I'll be critical when I want to be critical, but all I want to do is talk basketball. And I think we got away from that. I got away from that in the frustration of losing and the fact that you don't know who's coming back and the amount of money that's in and all of that stuff got to be drama. And so that's all real and it's going to happen. And I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to cheer for the uniform and Indiana. And after the games that we win, we're going to be happy. After the games we lose, we're going to be pissed, but we're going to share it all together. Have fun, and then chase Mrs. Tonsoni around. I mean, that's what's good. So
Priorities.
Yeah, priorities.
We all support this, Coach.
To be clear, we're not all going to do that, just you. So
Right.
Well, that's true. Losing is tough, and you got to take a step back and reevaluate and put your priorities together, and then understand it. You still love it. You still love the show. You still love the community. How can we best do that without getting that frustration level that I know I showed last year? I think a lot of us showed, a lot of fans showed in certain ways, and some of that's genuine, and that criticism is legit. But there's just a different way. So that's my take on why it was nice and refreshing to just sit back and reevaluate my fandom of college athletics in Indiana in particular.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton more to add. I guess the couple things that come to mind for me, which is probably pretty similar to what you guys have said. As you got toward the end of the season, I think part of this has been doing more shows and doing assembly call radio. You're not just doing the post-game show and then you're coming back on, or maybe it's somebody different talking about the same game that you just watched, trying to find a new angle to look at it, or doing different things like that. And there's been plenty of times over the years of doing the show that every game got to feel like a moratorium on the state of the program. And when we started, partly because when we started, there were absolutely no expectations at that point. And so anything was great. You didn't have to worry about anything that was good was magnified tenfold as you look through it in some of those early years because of where things had gotten to and things like that. And that was the part that really just, for me, and I think for you as well, you guys just kind of wears on you. We got away from, the conceit of the show originally was that it was a way for people didn't live together, a way to kind of feel like you're hanging out with your friends talking about the game. And it really just kind of got away from that to a point. I mentioned that even to some of you guys, even with I mentioned this to Jared with the meetup, it's awesome that everybody's there, but the amount of time that I spent hanging out with the three of you was pretty much limited to Sunday morning when we went to breakfast. Right. And So we got to figure out the ways to balance some of that stuff where the things that are really important and fun about doing, what somebody said is a voluntary activity, actually kind of remain that way and make it, make it fun for us to do. We've joked so many times about oh, this is fun. There's all the drops about that, but that's what it ought to be. And I think got to the end, wasn't feeling like it was fun. Everybody's kind of beaten down. And then you get into if we're not doing it, do you miss doing it? And to be perfectly candid with everybody, when we were yeah, I don't know if we're going to do a show this week, I was that's totally fine. Because what in the hell are you going to say? And the off season is, notorious for trying to figure out how to have something to say.
Some of the text conversations we have in the off season about what to do with the show are hilarious.
Yeah.
They really are past seasons.
Yeah. So I think that, and that's kind of where I was, and nobody should feel that, nobody should feel that way. Nobody should feel bad for us for feeling that way or whatever. It was just kind of the reality of the situation. So probably good a segue as any into, I'll turn it back to Jared and kind of talk about, things that we're thinking about doing now that we think hone in on the stuff that at least we feel is the wheelhouse of the show, and lean into that and lean away from some of the stuff that probably is not. And I think hopefully that makes it for a lot less repetitiveness from our perspective and probably from your perspective as a listener. But also, again, getting back to the roots of, kind of what we did and how we did it.
Yeah. And, just to be clear, I mean, we just want to talk about this because, we were gone for 7 weeks and a lot of people were asking us why. And we've always wanted to be genuine and authentic with what we're feeling, what we're doing, all that stuff. That's why we waited until 90 minutes into the show to put the focus on the basketball in the beginning. But those of you who are still here, theoretically, you've either fallen asleep and it's still going. So thank you.
We appreciate you.
Yeah. Yes. Those of you who are still here, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. Or, you're like the people who are here live and you're, the diehard people who show up for games and you're the people that really motivate us to keep doing this. And so we wanted to just let you know why. And the last thing I'll add is, the point here isn't just to be clear. It's not, we're the podcast victim of a struggling basketball program. Like, part of this was choices. I know I look at myself, choices that I made last year to get overly involved with arguing with people on Twitter, to go down the Discord rabbit hole of the Trilly Discord, and then try and bring some of that information back to the community and all this stuff. And man, I honestly got to the end of last season and I didn't really recognize myself. And I have to say, like, it has been so refreshing to just get away from that stuff, Twitter and Discord especially. And I feel bad because I haven't been interacting with some of you as much in there. But man, I needed to get away from it because it like changed the way I was thinking. It changed things I would say. I would tweet something. I'd be like, who is that tweeted that? Like, I wouldn't say that normally.
To be fair, we asked too.
Yeah, but and I think there's an insidious quality to some of those sites that you really have to be careful with. And so that was part of it, is just needed to step back and get a refreshed perspective. And again, those are choices that I made. I'm not blaming anybody for them, but at some point you have to recognize it and make a change there. And so that's another change. I mean, I think you'll see the Assembly Call Twitter account. I'm just using it much more now to promote our stuff, to promote other people's stuff. And that's pretty much it.
Some
I don't want to go down those rabbit holes anymore. Because whatever like little nuggets I was able to provide in the community absolutely were not worth the cost of trying to get those from whatever it took to do. We just want to get back to doing this, analyzing the basketball. We're not insiders. I know someone up here had a question, about Mike Woodson, if he's going to cut off access. Like, we don't have access and we don't want access.
Consider it done.
We talk to people.
Consider it done. Yes.
Yeah.
We are canceling our fan fest that we didn't have. We just want to watch the game just like you did and then hop on here and talk about it. And so getting back to the roots of what we're doing. And I think to Andy's point, we want to make sure that when we come on here, we have something useful to say, instead of having a schedule with airtime to fill. And that is a big difference. When you have a schedule with airtime to fill, which we had because our show was actually on the radio for several years in Indiana. So we had to do a show Thursday night because we had to get it to the radio producers so they could put it on. Well, the show's not on the radio anymore. We just kept doing Assembly Call Radio because it was fun and it was great to have that routine. And we're going to continue doing it some. But we want to make sure that when we come on here, we have something that we're excited and interested to talk about. And I think sometimes the schedule that we had set for ourselves by choice that wasn't happening. And so we're going to kind of change that schedule up. And so as we move forward, here for the off season, we have another show planned for August 22nd, and then another show after that planned for September 19th.
August 22nd is my birthday, by the way, so that should be a fun show.
Happy birthday. Okay, so it will be the roast of Ryan Phillips.
I'm good with it if you guys are. I mean, it's...
And look, this doesn't mean that we might not pop on. Like, if there's a big event, we have an email thread going right now. If we can try and get a post-game show set up for one of the basketball tournament games, we're going to try. So there may be things that pop up. But we're just going to kind of guarantee and schedule. We'll be here August 22nd. We'll be here September 19th. There's a couple specific topics we want to discuss. As October rolls around and we get closer to the season, we'll get back on a little bit more regular of a schedule because there will be the schedule release. There'll be Hoosier Hysteria. There are going to be exhibition games. So it's going to be a lighter schedule as we move through the offseason. And then, during the season, we're going to continue to do as many post-game shows as we can, but probably not do Assembly Call Radio most weeks, unless there's a week where there's no games, or again, if Braylon Mullins commits, we'll probably hop on and do a scouting report. But we're just going to step back from kind of the hard, rigid, we're always going to be here schedule, especially on Thursday nights. Because I think, number one, it will be less quantity, but more quality discussion. And I think for all of us, there's a certain mental load that helps remove a little bit for all of us with some of the other priorities we have going on that I think will be helpful. And hopefully prolong how long we can do this and make sure that we come to it with the right attitude, which I think, as we've all said, in hindsight, we're not sure we always did last season. And I think anytime you care about something and anytime you're putting something out there that is important to you, you should self-reflect and kind of look at what you're doing and see how you can improve. And that's really, when you kind of boil it down, what we've spent the time doing where we haven't been doing shows, it's been a lot of that and trying to figure out how we would have done stuff differently last year, how we would have done stuff better, and how we can do things better moving forward. And so that's the goal, is to, again, reduce the quantity, but improve the quality and longevity of what we're doing here, because it is important to us.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, where we kind of landed was the number of shows that we were doing was not sustainable for a variety of reasons, but also the swinging that to the other end of the pendulum and being like, nah, this is it, also didn't make a ton of sense. So this was kind of our thoughts on, again, kind of stick within the wheelhouse of what we feel like where our niche is and has been, and the parts that we enjoy, sitting around talking basketball with one another right in the aftermath of the game, having a group therapy session, having some fun, and calling it a day. So I think that's, if I had to boil it down, I think that's what I would say. And I think it feels like the right move for lots of different reasons as we look at it, and then we'll kind of adjust from there as we did this time. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I think it's does take some of the burden off of trying to always figure out what new angle to hit or new way to think about this or information to provide or different stuff like that. I think it really hones in on the stuff that got us started and still probably is the most important to us.
We're going back to our roots, man. The start is a post-game show, and we're going to still do that. I mean, this was a place for, as Jared said, like a place for people to hang out after the game. That was his whole idea when he pitched it, and we're still going to be that. That's not changing. Joel also asked in the chat if the meetup is done. Absolutely not, Joel. You can buy me drinks anytime, buddy. And we've actually talked about maybe
doing the show, and we'd still hopefully do it.
Yeah, but even the live show is so fun to do because we're doing it as interactive with the people there. I mean, but I would say, I think we've even talked about potentially, I mean, this is obviously not set in stone, but trying to increase our ability to do some stuff in Bloomington. I think that would be a long-term goal for us, is to do more. But as of now, meetup still a go. That's maybe my favorite thing we do, and I think that the others would agree that it's so fun. It's stressful to get it all together, I'm sure, and all of that stuff, but it is so much fun to get to see each other and get to see you guys, and to do something live is a ton of fun.
Yeah. But for the next few months,
Joel, go back and listen to some of those first few seasons.
Yeah, I think we did a few of those.
Video.
I think we did a few of those, yeah. But ultimately, for the next 3.5 months, we're going to get heavy into politics. So everybody really buckle up.
Yeah, really gear up.
Presidential election coming up. Lots of presidential
feels like the way to go.
Speaking of our wheelhouse.
Hey, I just contacted Nikki Glazier to come in for Ryan's roast.
Perfect.
I think that would be an excellent guest. She did great on a Tom Brady roast. So the 22nd, put that on your, calendar.
I'm going to make sure it gets posted in the Ryan Phillips is a No Talent West Coast Ask Clown Facebook group too, so we make sure that all the fine members of that community are around for it as well.
All right.
T-shirts coming
so
soon.
we really just need to cut through all the bull crap we just told you, because we just really got sick and tired of Ryan and needed 7 weeks off.
I mean, who can blame
That's the truth.
I have to live with me, guys. You don't even know. It's
Hey, that's a senior writer for Sports Illustrated.
Thank you very much.
By the way, I was very excited to formally introduce you as that tonight. I got very excited typing that on the run sheet earlier today. It's still cool.
You gave me I think the last show I was on was right after I'd announced it, and so you said it now. You said the biggest sports brand, and it is. It's and everything's been great there, and there, I think we've all had some major life changes in the past year, and one for Andy is that he's now looking at colleges for his daughter.
Holy crap, man!
That's what I said.
Jeez.
But
you're old, Andy.
There's been a lot of changes,
Damn right.
and and so we're all kind of figuring out the new way to move forward. And I think this is honestly, I think it's a great solution. I think the quality will be so much better too, because we won't be last minute before we log on. What are we talking about in the third segment? Like, there'll be stuff to talk about. And I don't know. I'm really excited about the new direction. And somebody said, like, had texted me, is like, are you guys done? I'm like, we're not going to be done anytime soon. It's just about adjusting and fixing. And honestly, this break has made me really energized for this moving forward. I'm excited to get back to doing what we do.
San Diego chicken.
Was that necessary? I said something really nice.
Moose requested.
Moose
Oh,
said it.
all right.
If
Well,
Moose
if
requested,
Moose
the sound
asked
dropped,
for it,
that's
then
it.
we get it. Yeah, it's fine.
I don't like carrots.
Justin said more segments on carrots, please. Yes. Politics and
Carrots.
vegetables. That's what we're
I've
going
had to start eating them.
Got to
for
give the
health
people what they
reasons.
want.
All right. Is there anything else to say on that topic? Hopefully we kind of covered it and gave a good explanation. Thanks to everybody for listening. Again, if you listen this far, we appreciate it. If you care enough about the show to care enough about everything that we just said, we really, really appreciate you and what you mean to the show and us and what we do. So thank you.
Yeah, I do this show for these three guys, all you listeners, and my insane salary. Those are the three reasons.
Yeah. You're going to hold out like Caleb Williams and not
Look, we'll talk. It's a new schedule. We're going to have to rework some things, Jared. It's you and I are going to have a call. My agent will be involved.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
Have you enjoyed all the I told you so's from all the Caleb Williams nonsense that had come out that now is obviously proven untrue?
Completely untrue. He's the most low drama. He's one of the most low drama athletes I've ever run into. And everybody's like, he's a diva. He's going to do this. It's like, no, he's not. It's so, and a lot of it is Mike Florio. I don't know what he has against the kid. He said, like, he asked for an ownership stake. It's like, no, he didn't. He's not an idiot. But yeah, I don't know. It's all stupid. Whenever somebody's really good, everyone picks on them. And LeBron James faced the same thing. I'm not comparing the two, how good they're going to be, but people that Caitlin Clark has faced it. There is just a thing about picking people apart when they're really good at what they do. And I think it sucks.
Man, there have been some wild Caitlin Clark opinions in the 7 weeks that we have been off. Maybe we'll address that on a future show, but holy moly.
Yeah. Somewhat amazing that they've been so outrageous that people, that are IU fans, she's become a somewhat sympathetic figure. I think that tells you all you need to know in a lot of ways. It's, pretty wild.
She's been incredible.
Pretty wild. A lot of people, a lot of opinions out there.
Yes.
A lot of battles.
Yes. Okay. Let's
Hasty after dark time.
Yes. So we will officially close this episode. That'll do it for this week's edition of Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, you can join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights. Well, some Thursday nights. Going to have to rewrite this for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Thank you to Bob Thompson for producing our music. Thank you to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. That will never change. And thank you, as always, for listening. We'll be back in a couple weeks unless we do a show for the basketball tournament. Until then.
Take it from me, Yogi Ferrell. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
I think they've gotten enough show.
I mean, not really, since it's only been once in like 8 weeks. So,
but it's an hour and 45 minutes.
I mean,
people on Twitter were asking for a 6-hour marathon to help make up for all the shows that we missed. So we got some time here.
We got 4 hours.
It goes
to go.
against the.
We got some airtime to fill.
Goes against the new directives.
Yeah, I was gonna say, goes against the tenet of not filling time just to say something. But yeah, so
Okay, am I still recording the After Dark? Or do you want me to shut off the... Okay.
Yeah, no, keep recording. That is one thing that will never change, is we will still have AC After Dark. Let's hit the music.
When the show is over, but there's more to be said, pour yourself a drink now, put the kiddies to bed. It's time to cut loose. No more censored remarks. So cozy up, chat mob, It's time for AC After
Gotta have a little butthole in you.
San Diego chicken shit.
Here I come, Coach Mike. I think I kissed a lot of girls. I think I might even kiss a lot of guys. I don't know. These are all rumors. I don't know what's true and what's not. Turn your butt cheeks on. Assembly call co-host arrested.
So many things to say about that after listening to it for the first time in a while. Number one point is, as fun and interesting as AI music is, nothing will top Bob Thompson.
Never.
That is still incredible work. And I love the dated Coach Fife reference.
And well, I listened back to the 1000th show, as I said, and his like the one shining moment, the 1000th podcast parody, I was dying. And we played it twice and I died both times and had to like pause it and go back and listen to it. It was amazing.
All right, I'm going to find that. We're going to play that later tonight.
Okay.
We'll play that. We'll play that at the end of the show. Okay. So a couple topics that we want to hit in AC After Dark. We got a lot of questions about this, so we figured we'll talk about it. A lot of people wanted to know our thoughts on what happened between the Hoosier Hysterics and Mike Woodson. Obviously, they posted a long podcast episode about this. And so I wanted to give you guys a forum to provide your thoughts. I gave some thoughts in the community and on Discord, which I can kind of reiterate here. But if any of you guys have opinions worth sharing either way, I figure we'll just open up the floor and answer that, because a lot of people did ask. And obviously it does have a tangible impact because, you know, events that fans were looking forward to going to, like the Fan Fest, are no longer going to be happening. So yeah, do you guys have thoughts that you don't feel like you need to, but if you have thoughts that you want to share?
I'll go last if you two have thoughts.
Oh man.
No, here's an
for
example. I
minimizing
think
our whatever.
Yeah.
points
No,
we had. Okay.
mine's gonna be a little longer, and I don't want you guys to get
LeBron passing up the game-winning shot there. Okay.
here's just an example of kind of like the new way that I'm trying to think. I did not listen to the Hoosier Hysterics podcast, so I'm really not going to make a lot of comments on what was said. Have I heard snippets of it and what people have said? Yes, but that's all secondhand. Do I have opinions on it? Yes, and I'll probably will share that. But ultimately, you know, I will take Coach Woodson's side on this. If he wants to run a program, he can run a program the way he wants to. He's the head coach, and if it's not good enough, then he won't be the head coach. I mean, I think he has a right to make those decisions. The question comes down to, you know, was it the right timing or all of that kind of stuff? But I'm probably going to stay out of that a little bit because I didn't hear all of that, and I obviously wasn't in the meeting. And those are the things that, you know, when I watch a game, I'm going to tell you the pick and roll didn't work. I'm going to try to stay out of some of that if I don't have direct information. But the Hysterics have done a lot of good for Indiana athletics, and I think that needs to be considered as well. And I know there is a love-hate situation with those two gentlemen and their work and their antics and so forth. And so depending on where you're at, you're going to look into this probably one way or the other. I will always go back to this new thing. I'm rooting for the uniform, right? So whatever's best for Indiana and Indiana athletics and Indiana sports and Indiana basketball, let's do it. And if this breakup was the best, then okay. If not, then maybe we need to look at doing things differently. But that's my quick take. That wasn't worth the crap.
We respect it, Coach.
I
don't
feel
know.
like talking.
No, I thought Jared's points that he put in were good. I think the biggest one for me is like it's pretty difficult to play in the space that they were playing in terms of running a collective, supporting the university, providing analysis. You know, I think it's one thing when you're having people on to share the great stories that they've had over time, because those are stories. They're the history book of IU basketball in a lot of ways. I think it becomes hard to do some of that. I think it's a difficult line to walk. I think it's also difficult for the university to say, okay, we're, you know, allowing access, we're doing whatever. You got to kind of know who you're doing business with and whether they had set forth things with them that said, you can't do this, don't do this. I have no idea. And so I think that's always going to be a tough space to play in and kind of keep everybody happy, but still do what you want to do. And I think that's ultimately, you know, I think back to the question of like, you know, cutting off our access. Like the access that we have has been great. We've had people get credentialed for things. Coach has certainly gone. We've had interns that have done that. That's the extent of the access that we've been granted over the course of time, as in a lot of ways viewed it for the interns as developmental opportunities for them and chances for them to help us out, but also get some valuable field experience. And I think that has helped, right? We don't feel, you're not trying to serve too many different people as you're trying to do what we're doing. And I think that's made it easier despite some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, right? Like there's always going to be challenges, but I think in that regard, it's been helpful a little bit because we didn't never felt like we necessarily owed somebody something or had to go approach a topic a certain way, that if we could approach it, respectfully and in an unbiased way, of just kind of reporting things as we see it on the court, talking about, as Coach said, what we saw in the game and things like that. I think we've talked a lot before about, you're criticizing actions or decisions, not the people, and things like that. And I think that, has allowed us to do that by not having some of those different things. So I don't know that probably added anything to the conversation, but everybody really just wanted to get to Ryan since he so graciously offered to go last. So I'll just be quiet.
He wanted to build suspense for it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hold on. Okay, now.
Well, now I don't want to do it. No. Look,
do you have a timpani somewhere? Can we get?
Do you want like a music bed underneath while you talk?
No, I think I'm good for now. I think it'll only muffle my voice. I do think. Look, I think the Hysterics have done a lot of good for Indiana. The archive of interviews they have put together will outlive all of us and has been amazing. And Coach, I can hear you typing. But
AC After Dark, the private chat just gets spoken into the microphone.
Crazy. So and honestly, I think that a lot of people were reaching out to me when this happened. Like, aren't you happy about this? I was like, no. I mean, we're all kind of, all these IU podcasts, we're all kind of friendly, or, there's not a whole lot of animosity there or anger or whatever. We're not all best friends, but we're all pretty friendly and sort of supportive of what each other do. Except for the Crimson Cast guys. I mean, Galen and Scott, the word tyrant is thrown around lightly a lot. Not there. That's real. But I know Eric and Ward a little bit. I consider them friends. I know their antics are not for everybody, but you have the freedom to not listen, not watch, and we're not for everybody. And you again have the freedom to listen or not listen, and watch or not watch. People have asked me though, do I think it was the right thing for them to air that publicly? What happened? And my answer is yes. If Indiana did not want that out, if Mike Woodson didn't want that out, he shouldn't have told it to the host of a podcast. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the guy's going to talk about it. And they also had to explain why those events were being shut down. And they have no obligation to lie on behalf of the program. And I've had some people say, well, it makes the program look bad. It looks like Hoosiers are all fighting each other. It's like, well, it seems like they are. I mean, it's the truth. And so I wasn't in that meeting. I don't know the exact run of things. I don't get the sense that Eric was lying about what happened in that meeting at all. I just based on what I know. And I would say that, if you don't want your feelings on a podcast and the results of a podcast, you have to be public. Don't tell it to the host of a podcast. And I'll also say this. If you're in the IU program right now, if you're a coach, somebody involved with the IU program, and you are monitoring what podcasts are saying about you, fan podcasts are saying about you, and reacting to them negatively, stop. If that really matters to you, what we say here, what they say there, what anybody else is doing on Twitter or anything like that, and it really matters to you so much that it's going to impact the way you do things, you are an unserious program. It should
I don't know that I agree with that, actually.
It should not matter at all. Now, it's one thing if we're saying horrible things about you, but questioning decisions and stuff like that, you're at a major university. People are going to, at a major basketball program, people are going to question what you're doing. And when you lose, people are going to talk about it. If you expect no criticism when you lose, but all the praise when you win, that's not the way it works. You know what job you signed up for. And if you, and this doesn't apply to Mike Woodson, it applies to everybody. It's not just him, it's everybody. You know the job you have, you know the program you have, you know the fan support, and you know that fans are going to be upset when they're bad, when things are bad, and they're going to be happy when things are good. You're going to get all the praise and adulation where things are good. Tom Crean was a god for like 2 years at Indiana. But when it went bad, it went bad. That's going to happen. And if you are so focused on the criticism and focused on all of the negativity, so much so that you want to give payback essentially to people who criticized you, then you're unserious. Your focus should be when you're bad, not to focus on all your critics, but to focus on getting better. And so that's the problem I have with it. Whether this is the right move for Indiana or not, we'll find out. I mean, and whether those guys should have that access and all of that stuff, that's between them and the university and not any of us. And if the university absolutely has the right to pull their access and all of that stuff, but I just think it's, we get feedback too on social media and stuff, people listening to this. And I know some of the people who criticize us are connected to the program. And it's like, if that's your focus is what we say, there's a big problem. And so I just think that, people need to step back and actually like do their jobs and focus on the right things. And I just don't think I think that situation seemed really petty. And, I don't know. Yes, they absolutely should have talked about it, I think, in my opinion. A lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I think they should have talked about it.
I don't know that I would say that it was petty. I mean, I think it speaks to. I think
if some of the things that were said are true, that felt kind of petty.
Well, okay, I should say I didn't listen to the episode, so
go listen to the episode.
I know. I've only heard. I've only heard what people have said about it, so okay. I should say that. I do think just what you've said and what other people have said, it speaks to the difficulty of the needle that Eric and Ward were trying to thread.
Yes, and that's a very difficult position to be in. It
is, and they actually did a great job of it for a long time. And no question, to echo what you guys have said, those guys have by far been a net positive for Indiana basketball. And some people no, we're not as close with them maybe as we were at one time, but there's no like rivalry or like issues there. And I want to see them be successful. But it is difficult, I think, to have a collective to, be doing what they were doing, but then also be hosting some pretty harsh criticism. And I don't think it is outrageous in this information age. Now, the head coach may not need to do it.
That was what I was referring to.
Yeah, I don't think it's ridiculous for someone in the program to monitor that stuff, especially in this case, because you have a lot of in-state recruits you're targeting that have parents that probably know who Brian Evans is. And if he's getting on there criticizing, that could be something that comes up in a recruiting meeting. Who knows? I'm not saying it does, but I do think those are some things now, if that's the collective podcast that's talking about that, the waters get very muddy. And so I guess what I'm saying is I can see this from both sides. I don't think it's clear cut one way or another.
I'll agree.
And I think, again, when you talk about, okay, should this be spoken about publicly? Well, no, if it was just a journalist in there at the meeting, of course you would have the expectation that it's going to come out. But you're talking to a podcast that has a collective to support Indiana, that is a fan podcast, where and we've struggled with this, right? Like, what's the responsibility to support the program or to be honest with your opinions for the audience? And it's a gray area. And this is part of the reason why we really haven't tried to push for access, because it's like when we did the show with Tamar, I noticed myself, I don't think I ever actually changed what I was saying, but I had to think about it, right? And so it's different, and it does create conflicts of interest, and it does get into a real gray area. So it's one of those, and I probably should listen, but just based on what's been said about it, I have a real hard time faulting either one of them. I just think it's kind of a situation that at a certain point was untenable, and something like this was probably inevitable. The way that both parties were approaching it is how.
I think it's on some level, like you both kind of knew what you were getting into, right?
Yes.
Like, and I think that's true on both sides. If you listen to some of their episodes during the Archie era, they were really critical of him, as were we, as was most everyone. But I think as the program, you got to figure out, like, you either need to set some ground rules that says, hey, look, this is an area that we want you to stay away from. We're on board with what you're doing from a collective standpoint and access and all of those kinds of things. I think that just gets difficult. Like, and I think from their perspective, you could see it as, okay, do I now have an obligation to the university based on these things? Like, I don't know if that's fair or not, but I think everybody knew kind of who you're, and if you didn't, shame on you, but I think everybody kind of knew like who you're doing business with. And I don't know that, you probably could have foreseen what you said of like, how do you thread that needle and try to be all of these things to all of these people? That's really tough to do. Don't think I could do it. And I think that just becomes pretty difficult, but I do need to run. It is rather late. I know I'll let you guys handle the other, 3 hours and 45 minutes from here. And
We got you, bro.
Right.
We'll
We're
look at it
rolling.
later, but yeah, anyway, so good chatting with
See
you
you, Andy.
guys. Appreciate everybody being here, and we will talk soon. Thanks.
Later, buddy.
See ya.
I care, man.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
everything that's been said is fair. I just think the way it came out is the question for me. You never got into anything official that I've heard from Indiana about not continuing access, and then it comes out on the podcast. It just all created some drama that I don't know. I mean, decisions like that, who gets access and who doesn't, who you're working with, that happens all the time. And that's what I said. If Coach Woodson doesn't want to have a fan fest where he gives up a Saturday or whatever, I think he's entitled to do that, and for his own reasons. It's just, how was it done? Who did it? And how was it communicated? Or how did it get out to the public? We're in a world now where everyone creates their own narratives, right? Because information just flies out as quick as possible and spreads. And then we all make up our own stories about stuff. There is more, there's a reason, obviously, that this breakup happened. And I think, that's fair. But the process kind of got muddled a little bit in how we all look at it.
Yeah,
It's just unfortunate because no one looks good, and it reflects poorly on
Right.
IU
That's
basketball. That's
yes.
I'll say one last thing about this. I again fully support them discussing it because, I mean, they had to explain why those events that they've planned for a long time were gone. I fully understand that Indiana basketball can pull anybody's access at any time if they want to. That is their right. But they fully accepted help from these guys for a long time, willingly allowed, were happy with them publicizing all the good about Indiana basketball. And the second thing and it feels like they get critical, justifiably, I would say. And it feels like, why are you doing that? Unless there was a contract that says you cannot criticize the coach. They didn't do anything. I don't think I listened to the show they're referring to, two of them, but Brian Evans one and another one. I don't think there was anything crazy said. I mean, Brian Evans has his opinions. He was also on other shows talking about it.
No, I don't think that stuff was crazy or out of line or
no. And so, yes, they can pull their access. They can pull any of that stuff away. Fine, that they're allowed to. But when we're talking about, did they have the right to air the conversation publicly? Again, if you don't want this coming out, don't have that conversation with a guy who hosts a podcast. What is he going to, you think he's just going to remain quiet? Guys, if Mike Woodson dragged me into his office and dressed me down, you can bet your ass I'm talking about it on the podcast.
God, I want video of that so bad.
I would be giddy to talk about it on the podcast. I mean,
But do we know that there's not more to it?
We know their story,
right?
And nobody has refuted it. Nobody has refuted his story. And if Indiana wanted to issue a statement to say, hey, this didn't happen, they absolutely could. It was big news for the day. I mean, that was circulating everywhere for a day. I had friends who have nothing to do with Indiana were like, what's going on with Indiana basketball? What am I like? And so I think it's one of those things where like you're setting yourself up to look bad and to ask somebody to fly from LA in for that meeting. You could have had a Zoom call. You could have had a quick Zoom call and said, hey, pulling your access of these things. That's it. And that could have been the entire call. It was a long meeting, and he discusses that in the episode. So I encourage you both to listen to it. Just fast forward to that part there where he talks about the meeting. It's worth listening to understand the perspective. And I think he had every.
Yeah,
right
I wasn't
to
like
talk.
actively boycotting the episode. I just stepped away from listening.
You
to
stepped away from
for a little
everything.
while.
I know. Yeah. And I'll just say I think he had every right to talk about it. It's something that happened to him. It's related to Indiana basketball. They are an Indiana basketball podcast, and they had to give a reason why these events they've been planning are now canceled. And people would have been really disappointed if they just announced they're canceled and didn't say anything. People would have been really angry at them. And so they needed to show, hey, we still
Were
want to
they
do
scheduled? Were they on the schedule, or were
I'm
they
pretty-
just like
I don't know if they
future
had the-
things?
I don't know if they had the dates yet, but they were setting. I don't know the exact thing, but they
So
were
it wasn't
gonna happen.
advertised or anything.
were going
it's just
to
something that returned every year, right?
Yeah, and they were. It was. I mean, it was all set up to happen. I don't know. So anyway, I you know, again, I know they're not for everybody. I know we're not for everybody. Whatever, and people love to pile on when things go bad with, someone you don't like or whatever. But I didn't see anything particularly wrong with it listening to the episode. So, and again, I would say, if it's that important to you, what's said on a podcast, I think your priorities are a little bent out of shape. And I would say that to the people who criticize us as well. It's like, you can criticize us, that's fine. We don't do this saying we're always right, or we're perfect, or we don't deserve any kind of criticism. We give our opinions. People are going to disagree, and you can criticize those opinions. It's fully aware. Like, we're fully aware of that. But if your angle is you're ruining the program, which we've heard a lot, like you're what's wrong with the program, you're what's wrong with Indiana, like all of that, it's like, dude, if what's said on a podcast is a problem with the program is not in a good place. Like, that has nothing.
This may be a conversation for a different day, a longer just conversation about the role of fan media.
Sure,
honestly.
no, I agree.
Because I think you're right, but that doesn't absolve people who have a platform from using it responsibly.
I would
never. That doesn't mean that everything is rose-colored glasses and all of that stuff, but it's like we've reflected on some of the things that we said, and we disagree on some of that stuff. But I think if you can color any portion of the perception of the fan base, that is a responsibility to take seriously, which we certainly do. So I don't think you can just say, well, you can't listen to anything a podcaster says, because all these things do add up to fan sentiment, which in this day and age does impact the team, because players see that. So I think that's important to keep in mind too.
But what I meant essentially, and I agree with you on part of that if you're not using the platform responsibly, that's certainly different. But criticizing a bad season you have a duty to your audience to be honest as well.
Yeah, as long as it's objective and not personal.
Yes. I would agree. Again,
yes,
agreed. And your duty is more to the audience than it is to the program. If you're truly being objective, it's to the people who listen to you. Your job is to be honest with them, not pump up the program. And in my opinion, and that's,
I think it's more 50-50.
Well, I come from a journalist background, so
I know
it's a little
we've always disagreed on that a little bit, but that's okay.
I will say this, as a coach, you've got to cut out the noise if you're going to be the best coach that you can be, and work on your team and prepare your team.
That's what should matter.
And
Isn't
I
that
do
harder
understand
to do today, though. Like, that was
it is brutally hard, and I never coached in the social media era. So again, when you hear that, and none of us like to hear that criticism from anyone, and you get your dander up a little bit as a coach when you hear someone who's not in the circle commenting. We saw it with Coach Knight, talking about all of the awesome reporters and everything, right? That's just natural for coaches. But I'm just being honest. If I were mentoring coaches, there are two types of coaches: those that have been fired and those that are going to be fired. Those are the two types of coaches. Like, very rarely do you get Coach K and Izzo and that last forever. If you get one, you want to keep them, but you've got to plan and work. And if you are worried about your rotations or your comments, or you're worried about the media aspect more than your ball club, that is a problem. And it is difficult for coaches at all levels to not go there. It is really difficult because none of us like negativity. We all like the praise, and we all work hard. There's not a coach that doesn't think they're doing well. And then you hear, oh, Coach Tonsoni on assembly calls saying we're not running the right offense, and it grates on you. But the great ones, they let it go in and they let it go out. And they may take the criticism and look at something if it's good. But that is a huge fault of coaches at every level, that they lose sight of what their main job is, and that's to run their program and let the media and let the fans that are critical be a part of it. Now, if it gets, again, personal and phone calls to your private residence and all those things, I'm not talking about that, but you got to be thick-skinned. I don't know that I was enough thick-skinned, to be honest, as a coach. It's an honest criticism of mine. I worried way too much. I think I've always told the story. I won a sectional championship, and we saved 1,000. The kids scored 1,000 game ball. You can't stop the game. And I presented it to them in the post-game ceremony back at school and got an anonymous letter, and it ate me up for 48 hours. And my coaches were mad at me that you got a regional game to get ready. And all I kept doing was bitching about whoever wrote this anonymous letter, that it was unfair that I only promoted one kid or whatever else. Totally unfounded. But I wasn't tough enough. I let that one letter keep me from preparing the team for a regional. Now, we won the regional, so I rebounded. But
won in the end, Coach.
But that is to Ryan's point. I do think there is a point there too, and this is where you got a lot of nuance here with this situation.
Yeah, it's such a different era, especially now, because so much of players' NIL value is tied up in their social media following, which they need to be active on to build. And so there are legitimate reasons for them to, not stay off of those things. But yet it comes with the good and the bad. And I'm a man. I'm 43. I just had a birthday. I'm 43. And it messed me up. So imagine being 18, 19, 20 years old, where you're still developing your self-identity, and how difficult that can be. I saw there was a news article about the Surgeon General, I think, recommending there should be warning labels on social media. I support that 100%. It's hard, man. It's difficult.
My summer has been fantastic. April 24th.
You look younger, Coach.
Yeah,
I know. I look good. It's a collared shirt. Might be a new assembly call thing to, kind of.
Home field apparel collared shirts.
So, but social media, and I don't know how these young athletes do it. I don't know how reporters, especially female reporters, handle some of the comments that they get. But it comes down to know who your audience is and know who your supporters are and all of that stuff. But, man, I have felt so much better now that when I just go to my Indiana list to look at who, what's going on. Then I get off right away. I don't get on the first thing in the morning. I'm not constantly scrolling. And what hit me was, as soon as I got my phone, the first thing I hit was Twitter. It's just like a reaction. And I'm going to help our students try to learn that. But as a coach, it's hard, it's difficult, but you have to Ryan's point.
So I should close my 10 burner accounts that I used to heckle you in March during bracketology season.
Yeah.
Just to get you, don't get me started on burner accounts. There's only 2 burner accounts, Martha the Mop Lady and Chronic Hoosier, that are worth a darn. Too many people hide behind. Again, there's a problem too. And I know those are parody. Yeah, and we know who they are at parody, but so many young people now go to burner accounts because then they can say stuff and don't have to be held accountable. And we've lost that in society now. You know what I mean? You say stuff, you own it, whether it's right or wrong. Yeah. Too many young people in our realm have burner accounts. Hooperazzi, you're not a damn burner account. We know who you are.
Everyone knows who he is.
That's just your name.
Oh, man, I feel like there's a whole bunch of little threads here that could be entire episodes. Get Galen on here to talk about his knowledge about social media.
Talk about me calling him a tyrant.
Gosh. It really is. I mean, Coach, you mentioned that earlier. It's just such a different world. By the way, I want to recommend, there was an article in The Athletic. Speaking of anonymous people, it was anonymous coaches and agents and players talking about NIL and what it's really like out there and the kind of numbers that are getting thrown around, and how sometimes coaches and collectives don't even know what they're negotiating against, because one team will offer I don't remember what the numbers were, 75,000, and the agent will go to another school and say they have an offer for 200,000. You know, and you have no way of knowing.
It's
just
sports
wild
free
and
agency.
crazy.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I would, if you want to kind of get like, what is this stuff really like? That was a really good article. It's in The Athletic. So if you go to the New York Times, you can find it because they're all intertwined now. It was really good. Worth the read. Any other topics on your guys' mind here?
No, that
For
was
AC
good.
After Dark. We're definitely going to play One Shining podcast. Or One Shining. What was, the One Shining.
1,000 podcast.
1,000th podcast. Sorry. Pour one out for One Shining podcast. Still miss those guys.
Always will.
Still miss those guys. I got to find it. Here, Ryan, talk about something.
So Jared right now is looking at his computer for a
Don't narrate what I'm
for an
doing. Talk
audio
about something
file,
interesting.
And that's what we do.
My
here on this
alarm,
show.
my alarm's set for 4:20 to get up and watch the Open Championship. I didn't.
That
know
wasn't
we were
what I
gonna
was
be on
thinking you
this.
were going to say.
420?
That
This
was
long.
definitely not what
No,
I
yeah,
was thinking
not-
you were gonna say.
Yeah, I know. I was like, whoa,
It is,
Coach.
man.
I never
Hey,
thought
AC
about
After
that.
Dark.
No wonder Coach looks so relaxed.
Yeah.
These gummies are really good. It's part of the
That's
new,
what we need to do at
new,
the next-
new
yeah.
thing.
That's the next sponsorship opportunity we should pursue, Jared.
Yes.
Just use that clip. These gummies are really good, and whenever you need to clip that, and whenever Coach goes off on a tangent,
That's great. Oh man, where is? I know I have this saved in here somewhere.
you have to.
I mean, I've definitely got it in my email, but I'm pretty sure I have it in.
You
It's
have
just
to
gonna take
have it
me.
in the
It's
bag
just gonna take.
somewhere.
Oh wait,
I would play it. I think I have it on my soundboard, but I don't
But
think my
yours
soundboard's
isn't
working.
working.
1,000th podcast. I found it.
All right, let's do it.
I found it. Okay. Here we go. 1,000th podcast. This was played during our 1,000th show. As many, and you know, it's Bob Thompson, man. He's great. So let's just play.
Nails it every time.
The mics are hot, the hosts appear, and even if it's late, the chat mob's here. And when we hear that William tell, no matter win or lose, we know all is well. 1,000th podcast of Assembly Call. 1,000th podcast, let's toast. The 1,000th podcast, a treat for us all. The 1,000th podcast, still Ryan won't host.
Ryan's being stupid again. Clearly, I was wrong.
I have a mad crush on Archie Miller.
I will follow this team through the pit of hell.
Noah was on a 2-year plan.
Here I come, Coach Fife.
I have plenty of problems with Steve Alford. Jeremiah April is real. Well, Kevin Durant plays shooting guard. I should have Evan Fitzner play shooting guard. I've been involved in poop explosions plenty of
The
times.
1,000th podcast after 13 years. The 1,000th podcast, it's true. The 1,000th podcast through laughter and tears. 1,000th podcast for the love of IU. 1,000th podcast.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers.
So great.
That is awesome.
So great. That Coach Fife soundbite really has a lot of legs. It shows up in a lot of places.
Archie Miller, Fife. Like, why does anyone listen to me? Take just the opposite of what Coach Tonsoni says.
Oh, man. All right. Well, good to be back, gentlemen. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We outlasted Joel. So he said he needed sleep. So he left.
His
Thanks for being
bourbon
here,
bottle
Joel.
was empty.
Everybody else. Anything else before we sign off for the evening?
See you in a month.
Oh.
Did I drop off?
Ryan just decided to go with the disembodied voice. Nice.
Weird. I don't know how
It
that. It's a new computer. I don't know what I'm doing.
He leaves the show, but his voice just stays with us.
Just gonna hang for a while.
Nightmare scenario.
Yeah. Hey, there we go.
He's gone, but he really isn't gone.
Yeah. All right, so we will be back for sure August 22nd, Ryan's birthday. And we may talk a little football, actually, that episode.
Sure.
We talked about with the excitement for the football program. We may just dabble in that just a little bit. It's obviously not our wheelhouse, but I think we're all pretty excited about the potential for what Kurt Cignetti is building. We'll talk about whatever the most pertinent IU basketball stories are. And between now and then, if anything happens or if we can get a show together for one of these basketball tournament games, we may pop on, but it'll just be a little bit more of a bonus than an expectation. But whenever we're with you again, we're looking forward to it. And yeah, thanks for being here. Talk to you,
everybody.
See y'all.